Imagine being the one person who could either save humanity or accidentally trigger an interstellar war just by saying the wrong thing. That was Theon Cross's Tuesday. And if you want to find out whether he saves us all or gets everyone turned into radioactive glass, you should probably stick around. The whole mess was happening at Nexus Egypt Station, humanity's biggest, shiniest monument to hope. Of course, that meant it cost 3 times more than planned and was mostly made of polished chrome and reinforced glass that did a fantastic job of reflecting everyone's panic right back at them. The station was dangling in the deep dark between 2 star systems, a glittering neutral zone where 2 civilizations, after 70 years of giving each other the silent treatment across the galaxy, would finally decide if they were going to trade recipes or nukes. The whole thing spun in a slow circle, not for fake gravity or anything practical, but to give every delegate what the brochure called a humbling rotating panorama, which really meant a stomach-churning reminder of just how big and terrifyingly empty space is. Inside, that carefully engineered optimism was starting to smell stale. The air, recycled for 2 decades straight, had a flat, metallic taste that coated your tongue like failure. You could feel the tension in the air, a static crackle of pure, undiluted anxiety. It was invisible, but you couldn't miss it. Terra's diplomats were huddled by the food station, their dark gray suits making them look less like ambassadors and more like they were at a funeral for someone who just wouldn't die. They were whispering in nervous little groups, their body language screaming, "I want to go home." The aliens, the Tyrians, had shown up exactly 1 hour ago, and no one had laid eyes on them since. They were locked away in their private section of the station, probably judging our primitive architecture, or maybe laughing at how inefficient our hearts are. The choice before them couldn't be simpler: peace, or the kind of war that turns entire planets into glowing parking lots. No pressure at all. Theon Cross was not an optimist. He was a xenolinguist, a guy who speaks alien. And right now, he was a catastrophically late, stress-sweating xenolinguist, sprinting through the docking bay like a runaway asteroid with a briefcase. His cheap, fake leather satchel slapped against his leg with every step, a perfect rhythm for his jackhammering heart. He wasn't even supposed to be here. His schedule had him booked for the Mars Colonial Hub, where he was supposed to be archiving the dead clicking languages of some old bug colonies. His biggest threat there was a grumpy coffee machine. But the main translator, a tough-as-nails woman who knew every little detail of Tyrian etiquette, had suffered what the official report called a complete psychological decomposition about 3 hours ago. The rumor was it involved a lot of screaming, a flipped table, and a whole bunch of shattered coffee mugs. So they made the call. They called Theon Cross, the unfiltered Theon Cross, the guy who once told a Xyloran ambassador that his fancy hat looked like a depressed lobster having an identity crisis. The thing was, he was brilliant with languages. His brain was just built differently, wired to understand alien speech in a way that left other experts scratching their heads. The problem was, he had absolutely no filter between the part of his brain that understood things and the part of his mouth that said them out loud. Director Gisham grabbed him at the entrance to the main hall, his fingers digging into Theon's arm with the desperation of a man whose entire career was about to go up in flames. Gisham's face was a permanent mask of anxiety and a bad case of heartburn. "You're late," he hissed, his voice like dry leaves skittering across concrete. "The shuttle had a problem," Theon gasped, trying and failing to fix his jacket while being dragged along. "And this jacket is all wrong. It's brown. Everyone else is in gray. I look like I don't belong." "I don't care if you're wearing a rainbow tutu and tap dancing," Gisham snapped, his grip getting tighter. "They are starting the official welcome ceremony right now." He pulled Theon into a little side hallway, his fingers squeezing hard enough to leave bruises. When Gisham spoke again, you could hear the raw fear in his voice. "Listen to me, Cross. Listen very carefully. This isn't Mars. This isn't some nerdy language club where everyone thinks your little jokes are clever. The Tyrians are sensitive, like catastrophically sensitive." I read the file, Theon cut in, trying to sound like he had it all under control. He didn't. They're telepathic empaths, high-context culture. They hate emotional displays. They think blinking is aggressive, and smiling is just a horrifying way of showing your teeth. I get it. Be a robot. No emotion. Got it. No, you absolutely do not got it, Gisham shot back, his eyes wide with pure terror. The last time we messed up this badly, the Tyrians put the entire Orion sector in timeout for a decade. A decade, Cross. No ships, no messages, nothing. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a frantic whisper. This princess, Calera, she's the one that matters. She's the Emperor's only kid, the heir to their entire civilization. She is everything. Your job is to be a box, Cross. A simple, boring translation box. She talks, you translate. We talk, you translate. No extra comments, no cross-isms, no jokes, no personal thoughts, and zero improv. Got it? Gisham's hands were actually shaking. Do not. And I am saying this with my career and several planets full of people on the line. Do not look her directly in the eye unless you are confirming a word. The Tyrians see our casualness as an attack. Cross. They think it's a form of violence. He stopped, staring into Theon's eyes, searching for a glimmer of understanding. Am I being perfectly, crystal clear? Crystal, Theon said, wiping a drop of sweat from his forehead. Be a box. A boring, brown, silent box. Understood. Good. Now get in there. They're waiting. Theon pushed through the doors into the grand concourse, and the sheer size of the room felt like a punch to the gut. The chamber was a massive dome of see-through metal, with a view of swirling, colorful nebulas light years away. And it was completely, terrifyingly silent. The human team was huddled on one side, looking tiny and guilty. On the other side, standing as still as statues, were the Tyrians. Theon had seen pictures and videos, of course. He'd read all the files. None of it came close to the real thing. They were incredibly tall, almost 7 feet, with a lean, graceful build that screamed they'd evolved on a totally different world. They gave off an aura of deep calm that wasn't peaceful. It was the absolute bone-chilling cold of empty space. Their skin was a soft, pale blue that seemed to glow with its own faint light. They were dressed in flowing robes made of some kind of shiny metallic thread that seemed to drink in the light and shimmer, creating a liquid-like effect. And then he saw her. Calera. The file just said, Princess Heir Apparent. Those words were a joke. She was standing at the very front of the Tyrian group, and Theon felt the smart language processing parts of his brain just switch off. The older, dumber parts of his brain, the ones that just look and react, took over. Wow, that was the only word his brain could come up with. The files had mentioned that Tyrians had different biology. But this wasn't biology. This was art. This was something so beautiful it broke the rules of physics. She had curves that seemed to ignore gravity, and she was wearing a gown that definitely wasn't made of cloth. It was something else. The material was iridescent, its color shifting like oil on water, and it seemed to ripple and move on its own, even though she was standing perfectly still. Theon just stared, completely captivated, as the gown's color changed from a pale lavender to a deep, shimmering emerald green that washed over the fabric like a slow wave. Have you ever had a secret that could start a war? I have. And the worst part is, it wasn't even my secret. My name is Theron Cross, and I was a translator, basically a walking, talking computer for diplomats who couldn't be bothered to understand anyone but themselves. That day, I walked into a room that felt like a glass cage full of alien cobras, and my cheap shoes squeaked with every step. All eyes were on me, this clumsy mouse, but the only eyes I saw belonged to the Tyrian princess. Her gown was alive, a swirling fabric of light that was supposed to show her emotions, and as I watched, It glittered with a deep, profound boredom that was quickly souring into pure frustration. She was miserable, and I was the only one in the room who knew. Getting closer to Princess Kira was like standing next to a supernova. Her skin wasn't just blue. It was a swirling galaxy of tiny, glowing pores that pulsed with soft light. And her eyes, they were pools of liquid silver with no pupils that seemed to peer right into your soul. When she glanced my way, I honestly felt the need to apologize for just existing. I cleared my throat, my voice cracking like a teenager's. "Translator Theran Cross, reporting for duty, sir." Ambassador Thornwell, my boss, a man who looked like he was born in a three-piece suit, just gave me a stiff nod. To him, I was just a piece of equipment. "Your Highness," Thornwell began, his voice so smooth and empty it could put you to sleep. As he spoke, Kira's living gown flashed a brilliant cobalt blue, the color of pure, unfiltered annoyance. I had to hide a smile. The whole ceremony was a joke. Thornwell was delivering this grand speech about building bridges of mutual respect, but his words were so hollow they barely cast a shadow. He was a master of talking for 10 minutes and saying absolutely nothing, and my job was to translate that nothing into a language of pure feeling. You see, the Tyrian language wasn't made of words. It was a symphony of emotions and concepts projected like a feeling. You didn't just say bridge. You had to project the feeling of connection, of safety over a dangerous gap. And I was good at it. As I took Thornwell's empty words and shaped them into a feeling of a strong, hopeful bridge, I felt her silver eyes lock onto me. She wasn't watching the pompous ambassador anymore. She was watching me, the translator. For a moment, her gown settled into a cool, professional lavender. She was intrigued. Then it was her turn. An attendant gave her a crystal flute of clear liquid. She took it with a grace that didn't seem possible and raised the glass. The room went dead silent. And then she spoke. Her voice wasn't a sound you hear with your ears. It was a sound you feel in your bones. It was like wind chimes made of starlight, and it was the most beautiful and terrifying thing I had ever experienced. And now, I had to take that perfect cosmic music and crush it down into clumsy, ugly human words. "We acknowledge the hand that builds," I translated, my own voice sounding like gravel in comparison. "We see the gesture offered. May the stones you lay be true." It was all very formal, exactly what the diplomatic rule book called for. The summit was actually going smoothly. Thornwell raised his glass. She mirrored him, and for a second it looked like we might avoid a catastrophic failure. I should have been relieved, but I wasn't. I was standing just 3 feet from her, close enough to smell her scent, like clean ozone and chilled flowers. And I was close enough to see the truth. Her hands were tense, her face was a perfect mask. But the gown was screaming. It was pulsing with a deep, heartbreaking scarlet. My brain scrambled, pulling up a piece of data from a deep-level security file, one Thornwell had probably never even read. Scarlet wasn't annoyance or boredom. Scarlet meant pain. Deep, hidden, structural agony. She was standing there, saying all the right things, while her very skin was silently screaming for help. And that's when it all clicked into place. All the pieces fell together in one horrible, crystal-clear picture. The briefing files described her as a perfect, intimidating, bioengineered being. But it was all a lie. Her perfection, her flawless blue skin, her impossible beauty. It wasn't a gift. It was a cage. A beautifully sculpted prison that was causing her unimaginable suffering. As I translated the end of her speech, "We drink to what is seen," my own mind was screaming a single, catastrophic thought. The whole summit was a lie. Her formal words were a lie. Even her gown was telling 2 stories, one for the public and a secret, painful one for anyone close enough to see. The room was silent, waiting for the clink of glasses to seal the deal. But in that perfect silence, my audio implant, still hot-wired to my brain from the translation, did the one thing it was never, ever supposed to do. It picked up my own thoughts. It wasn't a translation. It was a realization. My realization. And my implant broadcast it at full diplomatic volume into the silent room. Her body is a prison. The words just hung there in the air, vibrating. My blood turned to ice. I hadn't meant to say it. Hadn't even realized I was thinking it so loudly. It was the epitaph on the gravestone of my career. Ambassador Thornwell's face went from pale to purple with rage. The Tyrian guards, massive figures in black armor, put their hands on their weapons. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. I had just single-handedly wrecked the summit and probably started a galactic war. I opened my mouth to try and fix it, to say anything, but my treacherous implant wasn't done. The second half of my horrified thought tumbled out, amplified for all to hear. And she's in agony. But it was her reaction that silenced everyone. Instead of ordering her guards to vaporize me, Kira held up a single, elegant hand. She looked right at me, and for the first time, her silver eyes weren't looking through me. They were looking at me. The chaos on her gown suddenly stopped. It wasn't flashing anger or shock. It was swirling with a deep, vibrant gold, a color that meant revelation and hope. She had been waiting for someone, anyone, to see past the perfect illusion. Then she spoke, not with her voice of starlight, but directly to me, through the language of pure feeling. A wave of profound gratitude and relief washed over me. I turned to the stunned, horrified room and translated. The princess says, the bridge is now real, because for the first time, a human has chosen to see the truth instead of just the appearance. Ambassador Thornwell looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. His career was over, and mine had just begun. Her gown settled into a warm, soft glow of pure contentment, a color no human had ever seen before. And I learned that day that true connection isn't about saying the right words. It's about having the courage to see the real person hiding underneath. Cross felt like a bug pinned to a display board, completely exposed under the harsh lights of the lab. And then, something impossible happened. Instead of exploding in rage or calling for his head, Princess Kara did something no one saw coming. A tiny, almost microscopic change happened at the corner of her lips. It was a smile, but not a human one. There was no baring of teeth, just the faintest upward twitch, a secret little nod that lasted less than a second. She didn't say a word. She just set her untouched drink down with slow, deliberate grace. Then, smooth as flowing water, she turned and walked right out of the room. Her entire team, in perfect, silent agreement, spun around and followed her. They didn't hurry or storm off in a huff. They just left, with total and complete dignity. The massive doors of the concourse hissed shut behind them, the sound echoing with a digital finality. The human team was left standing alone in a sudden, ringing silence that felt like a disaster. The confusion was absolute. It was somehow so much worse than if they had just gotten angry. Anger they could have dealt with. They could have managed. This was a mystery. It was like a diplomatic black hole with no obvious way out. Cross was frozen solid, his heart pounding against his ribs like it was trying to break free. Ambassador Thornwell turned slowly, moving like a predator, his face as pale as a sheet. Security. Thornwell's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the room like a knife. Take him into custody, now. Before the human guards could even react, two of the Tyrian guards, who had purposefully stayed behind, stepped forward. They were giants in black obsidian armor, radiating a barely controlled sense of danger. One of the huge Tyrian guards grabbed Cross's left arm, his grip feeling like solid steel. A human security officer, seeing his target being moved, lunged forward and grabbed Cross's right arm. He's with us, the human guard grunted, trying to pull rank. The Tyrian guard didn't speak or argue. He just turned his head and looked at the human officer. I mean, he really looked at him. The sheer weight of that alien stare, perfectly calm and totally unyielding, said everything without a single word. The human officer, showing a surprising amount of good sense, immediately let go and took a step back. The Tyrian's grip was like being caught in a factory press. Not painful, but there was absolutely no escaping it. They weren't taking Cross in for questioning. They were claiming him, making a statement of ownership that went way beyond any legal jurisdiction. Cross was literally dragged out of the grand concourse, his feet barely scraping the polished floor. He spent the next 6 hours in what the Tyrians politely called a contemplation chamber. It wasn't a cell, at least not like any he'd ever seen. It was a room with no seams, made from something that looked like white ceramic, but had a strange, organic feel. There was no furniture at all. The light didn't come from a bulb or a panel. It seemed to glow from the walls themselves, creating a soft, even light that left no shadow. The temperature was set to be perfectly uncomfortable, just cold enough to keep you awake, but not so cold that you could call it torture. They didn't question him or ask him anything. Instead, a Tyrian elder, with skin the color of a deep purple bruise and wrinkled like old paper, just sat cross-legged in the corner for about 3 hours, watching Cross with unblinking silver eyes. Cross could feel it, a faint probing feeling at the edge of his thoughts. It was a cold, dry, telepathic curiosity, like invisible fingers gently testing the defenses of his mind, looking for weak spots, for a way in, for the truth. It became clear through this mental connection that the Tyrians weren't angry. They were, just like everyone else in this mess, incredibly confused. By their standards, what Cross had said was a huge social blunder. It was crude, unforgivably so. It was personal in a way that broke every rule they held dear. In their culture, it was basically a form of psychic attack. And Cross could feel them struggling with this new thought. It was also true. Undeniably, uncomfortably true. And they honestly had no idea what to do with a human who had just blurted out the raw, unfiltered truth directly into the mind of their royal heir. After a while, the elder just stood up, gave a single nod that could have been respect or maybe just acceptance, and left. The door hissed shut behind him. Cross was alone again. He sat on the cold floor, his back against the seamless wall, completely convinced he was about to be either cut open for science, have his memory wiped, or maybe just left in this sterile white room until he went completely insane. The hours crawled by at a painfully slow pace. The soft white light slowly started to dim, creating what his internal clock figured was their version of nighttime. He was completely worn out, physically, mentally, and emotionally. He must have fallen asleep at some point, because he was jolted awake by a sound, or rather by the complete lack of it. The silence felt different. The door to his room had opened without making a single noise. A single Tyrian guard stood in the doorway, a dark silhouette against the faint light of the hallway. Cross knew him instantly. It was one of the 2 giants in black armor from the concourse, one of Kalara's own personal bodyguards. The guard didn't say a thing. He just tilted his head in a gesture that didn't need any translation. "Come with me." Cross's legs felt like they were made of lead. He got to his feet, shaky, every muscle screaming in protest. He followed the silent guard down the corridor. This is it, Cross thought, feeling a wave of resignation. The execution. They've made their decision. They're taking me to the end of the line. The guard led him deeper into the Tyrian part of the station. The architecture here was totally different from the human areas. Everything was made of flowing, organic curves and strange, biomechanical structures that pulsed with a faint, inner light. It felt less like walking through a building and more like moving through the arteries of some giant, sleeping creature. Even the air felt different here, cooler, with a sharp smell of ozone that made his skin tingle. They stopped in front of what looked like just another part of the seamless wall, no different from any other. But as the guard got closer, the wall just opened up like the iris of an eye, the material flowing away like liquid to show a dark room inside. The guard gestured once. "Enter." Cross stepped over the threshold. The room was pitch black. The door sealed behind him with a soft hiss, leaving him in total and absolute darkness. His heart jumped into his throat, beating so hard he could hear the blood rushing in his ears. "I was warned," a voice said out of the darkness. It had that unmistakable, bell-like quality that could only belong to one person. "I was told that humans were crude, that you were all impulse and noise, with no real self-control." It was her, Princess Kara. A light flickered on, but it wasn't a normal light. Cross realized with a jolt that the light was coming from her own skin. She was floating in the middle of the room, suspended inside a small, zero-gravity meditation sphere. Her fancy diplomatic gown was gone. Now she wore a simple, practical tunic in a soft gray color. There were no royal decorations, no ceremonial frills. Somehow, she looked both younger and way more powerful like this. Her soft, sky-blue skin was the only source of light in the room, casting an otherworldly glow that made her look almost like a ghost. Cross swallowed hard, and the sound felt loud enough to start a landslide. He opened his mouth, and the words just tumbled out in a desperate, jumbled mess. "Your Highness, I don't know what happened. I didn't mean to, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." She floated closer, her silver eyes studying his face with an intensity that felt like she was reading him. Like his entire soul was a book she could just scan and understand. She stopped about 5 feet away, close enough for him to feel the slight chill coming from her alien body. "The summit is over," she said. It wasn't an accusation. It was just a fact, delivered with the kind of flat precision you'd use to report data. "My father is calling our delegation home. Terra Command is demanding I have you executed immediately. My own security guards think you committed an act of unauthorized intimacy, which they're calling a telepathic assault." "It wasn't telepathic," Cross whispered, his hands trembling by his sides. It was verbal. A mistake, an accident, a slip of the tongue." "A slip of the tongue," Kalara repeated, tilting her head with that uniquely alien curiosity. "You humans are strange. Your tongues just slip and profound truths fall out. How fascinating." Cross just stared at her, unable to tell if she was making fun of him or if she was actually intrigued. She looked away, her eyes drifting towards the viewport, which was currently covered by heavy blast shutters, blocking his view of the stars outside. "For 10 years, she began, her voice shifting, becoming quieter, more personal. "I've been groomed for this exact role. They taught me how to stand, how to talk, how to walk, how to be the flawless, living embodiment of Tyrian grace and might." She paused, and I could see the tension tighten her shoulders. "Every ambassador, every courtier, every single person, they all look at me and they see the symbol. They see the gown, they see the perfect illusion we've built." She turned back to me, and her gaze was so intense it felt like it could physically cut me. "They look," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "But they never actually see. They see what they're supposed to see. What I was designed for them to see. What our scientists and political advisors engineered for them to consume." She floated until she was barely inches away from me. I could literally feel a chill coming off her, like standing next to an open freezer. "But you," she whispered, and her tone was a strange mix of awe and maybe even sadness. "You looked at me, and you didn't see the symbol." I felt like I couldn't breathe, like my lungs had just forgotten their job. "You saw the truth," Kalara said, her silver eyes locking onto mine with an incredible force. And that is rare, so unbelievably, almost impossibly rare. My brain felt like it had been short-circuited by a bucket of ice water. Rare was all I could manage to choke out, the word sounding ridiculously small and dumb. I am the heir to the Tyrian Empire, Kalara stated, her voice now perfectly flat and smooth. That musical quality was completely gone, replaced by a precise, robotic tone that told me she wasn't playing a role anymore. This was the real her. I am the single most analyzed, watched, and guarded person in this entire sector of space. My slightest gesture can change policy. My vital signs are classified state secrets. My physical body is considered a matter of galactic security. She drifted even closer, and I had to tilt my head back just to look up at her, suddenly feeling very small and fragile in comparison. "Do you have any idea what we are, Cross?" she asked, using my real name for the very first time. "We Tyrians. Do you really get it?" "Telepathic," I stammered. "Empathic. You feel what others are feeling, their thoughts." "We are drenched in it," she corrected me, her silver eyes sharp and overwhelming. "Absolutely drowning in the emotional noise of everyone else. We don't have filters like you do. A human mind is a locked box. Your thoughts stay inside your own head, private and safe." She spread her hands, showing the massive gap between our species. "A Tyrian mind is an open field," she went on. "Every random emotion, every snap judgment, every unspoken prejudice from every person near us. We feel it all. We experience it as if it's our own. Imagine a constant hurricane of other people's feelings slamming into your mind every second of every day." It was starting to click for me, the strict formality, the emotional coldness, all those rigid rules. "It's why we value control, elegance, and restraint more than anything else," Kalara said, seeing the understanding dawn on my face. "It's not about looking good or being fancy. It's about survival. We build these towering walls of etiquette and protocol just to keep the noise out, to carve out a tiny, quiet space where we can exist without being driven insane. And what you did," she continued, a new sharpness in her voice, "wasn't just a simple mistake. You're a translator, Cross. Your brain is naturally wired for our language, even without the formal training. When you had that thought, that sudden realization, you didn't just think it. You broadcasted it. You skipped right past all the proper channels. You blew past my guard's psychic defenses. You punched a hole straight through my shields and shot that thought directly into my mind." I flinched, feeling as if she'd actually hit me. "Your Highness, It was an accident. I swear, I didn't know. I didn't mean to—" "It was an accident," she agreed. "An unsanctioned telepathic intrusion. A very, very serious crime according to our laws. My personal guard should have eliminated you on the spot, and they would have been completely within their rights." "Then why didn't they?" I asked, my voice a dry croak. "Why did you smile?" Kalara stopped moving, just hovering there in the zero-gravity chamber. "Because," she said softly, "in 10 years of public service, in 10 years of being stared at, picked apart, measured, and judged by thousands of beings from dozens of worlds, it was the first thing anyone has ever projected at me that wasn't a lie." She pointed to her simple gray outfit. "Humans, you can be crude. You see my body and you project desire, or envy, or fear. Just raw, unfiltered feelings. My own people see me, and they project duty, respect, and impossible expectations. They see the symbol." She glanced down at herself. "They see the cage I was put in." Her voice became a bare whisper. You looked at me, and you saw me. You saw the pain hidden beneath all the perfection. You saw the lie, and you called it out, even by accident. You said you were just being honest. Well, your truth matched my truth perfectly." She turned away from me, floating towards the sealed window. The soft blue glow from her skin seemed to dim, and in the shadows I could see her shoulders tense up as she fought to control some powerful emotion. "This body," she said, her voice now so quiet I could barely hear it. "This form that you find so distracting. It's not Tyrion. Not really." I just blinked, completely confused. "Ma'am?" "I wasn't born looking like this," Kalara said, turning back to face me. "Our natural forms are thinner, more angular, less defined by these curves and pleasing shapes. We are beings of the mind, Cross. Our bodies are just vessels, simple tools for our consciousness." "Then, what is this?" I asked, waving my hand vaguely in her direction. "This," she said, and I could hear the bitterness in her voice now, "is a diplomatic weapon, sculpted with ancient biotechnology. Our geneticists and political strategists spent an entire decade designing it. They engineered it based on deep studies of your species' primitive, visually driven psychology." She gestured at her own body. "The curves, the proportions, the perfect symmetry. Every single detail was carefully crafted to tap into what alien species find beautiful and powerful. It's meant to inspire awe, to disarm our enemies before a single word is spoken. This body is a lie, Cross. It's a weapon of soft power, and I am just the one forced to pilot it." That confession hit me with the force of a dying sun. I stared at her impossibly perfect shape, and for the first time, I didn't see a princess. I saw a beautiful, tragic work of art, a living sacrifice made for political gain. I am Cross, the one who doesn't think before he speaks, and the words tumbled out of my mouth. Do you regret it? Letting them do that to you?" Kalara's silver eyes locked with mine. The silence in the room became so tense it felt like a knife's edge. "Every single time someone looks at me," she answered, her voice cold, clear, and brutally honest, "and doesn't actually see me." Before I could even begin to process the crushing weight of her words, the door to her chamber hissed open. A Tyrian guard, one of those hulking giants in black armor, stepped inside. He gave a respectful bow, but his body was rigid with tension. He spoke in rapid, high-protocol Tyrian, a burst of clicks and empathic pulses that my brain started translating automatically, despite my shock. "The Emperor has sent a command. You are to return at once. The summit has collapsed." "The humans are demanding the translator's execution." Kalara's face remained a perfect mask. She just gave a single nod. "Hexer," she said, apparently using the guard's name, "wait outside." The guard left, but in his place, Director Gisham practically stormed into the room, his face blotchy and red with pure rage. He had 2 Terran security guards with him, and their hands were twitching nervously over their weapons. "Your Highness," Gisham spat, throwing all diplomatic manners out the window. "This summit is a total disaster. Your father is pulling your entire team. Terra Command is filing official complaints against you, and I'm here to take him." He jabbed a shaky finger right at me, as if I were a piece of radioactive garbage. "He is under my protection," Kalara declared, her voice suddenly booming with a royal power that seemed to make the very air hum. "He's a Terran citizen," Gisham yelled, his voice cracking under the pressure. "And he has been officially fired from this assignment. He's being sent back to the Mars Colonial Hub, where he'll face a full debriefing and probably a court-martial for espionage." My stomach felt like it had fallen through the floor. A court-martial on Mars? That was a death sentence. "He is not leaving," Kalara said, her voice leaving no room for argument. She floated down until her feet touched the floor, standing a full head taller than Gisham, using her height as a weapon. "You can't just keep him," Gisham sputtered, his bluster starting to fade. "He's not your property. This is kidnapping. It's an act of war." "No," Kalara said calmly. "He is not my property. But what happened here has created a complication. one that your crude culture could never possibly understand. By our most sacred laws, the unsanctioned mind link he created makes him a part of my royal court. He is now, for all intents and purposes, a Tyrian state secret. To take him would be an act of aggression against the throne itself. Now get out of my sight." "We have a problem," Kara declared, her voice carrying an ancient authority that made the human bureaucrat flinch. His mind connected with mine, and in a moment of pure honesty, he formed a truth bond. It's a binding telepathic link recognized by our most sacred laws. According to protocols that are older than your entire recorded history, he is now a vital part of my diplomatic security. His perspective is permanently tied to mine." Cross just stared, his jaw on the floor. "What?" Gisham, the bureaucrat, looked completely lost, his mind short-circuiting as he tried to grasp the alien legal idea. "A telepathic bond? That's ridiculous. You can't be serious. That's alien garbage, a legal trick," Gisham sputtered. "You're taking him hostage and dressing it up in some kind of mystical nonsense." "I am following protocol," Kara said, her voice becoming so cold it could freeze air. "He stays with me. He is the only translator I will now use for any further talks. His honesty makes him indispensable. His viewpoint is now critical to my diplomatic mission." She took a single step toward Gisham, who instinctively stumbled backward. "You can tell your superiors that if they want this summit to continue at all, the translator Cross remains with me. If they try to take him by force, we will view it as a direct attack on my person, an assault on the imperial heir. Now get out." Gisham's eyes darted between Kara's terrifyingly calm, unmoving face and Cross's utterly stunned expression. He shot a nervous glance at the Tyrian guards, who had silently moved forward, their hands resting on their strange energy weapons in a way that left no room for argument. Gisham had lost, and he knew it. You could practically see the political calculations running through his mind, all of them ending in one conclusion. "Retreat. This isn't over," he hissed, backing away toward the door as if he were escaping a predator. "You've just declared war, princess." The door slid shut behind him with a final, heavy whoosh, leaving the room in a sudden silence, pierced only by Cross's sharp, panicked breaths. "A truth bond?" Cross finally choked out, his voice thin and shaky. Is that a real thing?" Kara turned to face him, and for just a split second, he saw that tiny, subtle smile again, a private little secret just for him. "It is now," she said softly. Cross wasn't a hostage. He was a prisoner, but even that didn't feel like the right word. He was something new, a bargaining chip, a diplomatic weapon, a walking, talking, legal nightmare. They gave him a room right next to Kara's private suite, made from the same strange, flowing white material that looked like it had been grown instead of built. The furniture itself seemed organic, as if it had sprouted right out of the floor. A Tyrian guard was posted at his door around the clock, not so much to keep him in, but to make sure no one else could get to him. Just as Kara had said, he was essential, critical, integral. He spent the first 24 hours pacing the room like a trapped animal, his mind spinning, trying to process what had happened. He hadn't just torpedoed his career. He had somehow, completely by accident, become the main character in an intergalactic diplomatic crisis. He was now telepathically bonded, whether for real or just on paper, he still wasn't sure, to a princess who was, by her own admission, a piece of living, breathing political theater. Outside the Tyrian ship, things were falling apart fast. The summit was on indefinite hold, which was politician speak for completely collapsed. The Emperor's flagship, the Ascendant, was on its way. But it was still about 3 days out. The human delegation was screaming for Cross's release, but he suspected they were also scared to death of what Kara might do if they pushed her too far. He was, for all intents and purposes, a human shield. On the second night of his bizarre 5-star imprisonment, he was pacing his room again, trying to figure out the Tyrian food paste he'd been given. It had a strange taste, like mint and static electricity, a flavor that shouldn't be possible, but somehow was. That's when he heard a noise from Kara's room next door. It wasn't her voice, which sounded like soft chimes, and it wasn't footsteps. It was a thud, a heavy, ugly sound that was completely wrong. Cross froze with the spoon halfway to his mouth. He listened. The Tyrian guards in the hallway were perfectly still. He could feel their quiet presence through the door. Everything was silent. Too silent. Then he heard it again. A sharp, sizzling noise coming from Kara's main doorway, the sound of something burning right through metal. Cross wasn't a soldier. He was a linguist, a guy who liked dusty old books and quiet rooms, not danger. But he was also the man who had seen the deep, soul-crushing sadness behind the princess's silver eyes, the invisible cage she was forced to live in. He didn't shout for the guards. He wouldn't even know what to say. He just moved on pure instinct. His eyes swept the room. The Tyrian furniture was all smooth, seamless, and totally useless as a weapon. All except for one thing. Sitting on a pedestal was a sculpture, a heavy, twisted chunk of silvery blue metal that was supposed to represent something called conceptual harmony. It was weird. It was pretty. And most importantly, it looked heavy. Cross snatched the sculpture. It had to weigh at least 20 pounds. Solid. He rushed to the adjoining door between their rooms, a door only he and Kara could open, and slapped the panel. It slid open without a sound. Kara's chamber was dark, lit only by the faint glow of her zero-gravity meditation sphere. She was floating inside it, eyes closed, deep in a peaceful trance. But her main door was spitting sparks. A small black device was clamped to the lock, melting its way through the security system with cold precision. "Your Highness," Cross whispered, his voice tight with panic. Kara's eyes snapped open. She saw him, then saw the melting lock. She didn't scream. She didn't freeze. She simply started to float calmly toward the floor, her movements graceful and sure, even in the middle of a crisis. The door blew inward with a bang. A figure dressed from head to toe in black stealth armor lunged into the room. The armor wasn't Tyrian. It was built for a human, and the person inside moved with the deadly efficiency of a trained killer. The assassin raised an arm, and Cross saw the ugly shape of a neural disruptor, a weapon designed to fry a nervous system, perfect for killing a telepath like a Tyrian without leaving a mark. The assassin aimed it straight at Kara. Cross didn't think. He didn't weigh the odds. He let out a raw, guttural roar, a primitive sound that had no place on a starship, and charged, swinging the conceptual harmony sculpture like a caveman's club. The assassin, shocked by the sudden appearance of a screaming human wielding a 20-pound piece of modern art, turned to face the new threat. Cross brought the sculpture down in a clumsy, two-handed arc that was all brute force and no skill. The assassin threw up an armored forearm to block. The metal hit with a sickening crunch of shattering armor and, Cross hoped, breaking bone. The neural disruptor went flying, skittering across the floor into the shadows. They both crashed to the floor in a tangled mess. Cross, running on pure adrenaline and terror, slammed his shoulder into the attacker's chest, pinning them down. The assassin was strong and fought back hard, twisting and trying to reach for another weapon. Cross just held on for dear life, grappling with everything he had. Suddenly, the Tyrian guards were just there, appearing like ghosts. Two of them, giant figures in black armor, peeled the assassin off Cross and slammed the figure to the floor with brutal ease. A third guard stood over Kara, who had landed on her feet and was watching the whole thing unfold. Her face was pale, but she was impossibly calm. Cross scrambled away, his chest heaving, his face bleeding where an armored glove had clipped his cheek. "Hexer," Kara said, her voice sharp as glass. "Take the intruder alive." One of the guards ripped the helmet off the assassin. The face underneath was human, sweaty, twisted in a snarl of pain and fury, and with no identifying marks. The guard looked at Kara. "Secured, Your Highness. The subject is alive." Kara gave a single nod, her silver eyes moving from the captured assassin to the guard, and then, finally, to Cross. Still down on one knee, he was clutching the now dented Harmony sculpture, his chest heaving. He looked like a wild animal, terrified and completely out of place in this sterile alien environment, and he had just saved her life. "You're bleeding," Keller noted quietly. "It's nothing," Cross panted, trying to get his breath back. Her eyes stayed on him. The trust she'd had in him before was a fragile, curious thing, but in that moment, it hardened into something real, as solid as the sculpture he was holding. The entire dynamic between them had just been turned upside down. By the next morning, Cross wasn't just the bonded translator anymore. He was the guy who'd passed some kind of primitive loyalty test, the human who, against all logic, had chosen to protect her. "If you're going to stay by my side," Kellara told him, while a medical drone stitched up the cut on his cheek with microscopic accuracy, "you need to be more than just a blunt instrument who swings statues at people." "What's that supposed to mean?" Cross asked, wincing as the laser seared his skin shut with a smell like burnt hair. "It means you're a diplomatic security nightmare," she stated, not with malice, but as if just pointing out the weather. "Your mind is loud. It broadcasts like a hailstorm of scrap metal. Your posture is an offense to basic biomechanics. Your entire species walks like you're constantly about to fall on your face. We have to fix this." And that's when the training from hell began. Kellara turned out to be an impossibly demanding and terrifyingly precise teacher. She drilled him without mercy in one of the Tyrian sector's massive empty chambers. It was a huge space with flowing, curved architecture that seemed to make every one of his clumsy missteps echo. "We don't walk," she instructed, demonstrating a movement that looked both effortless and impossible. "We proceed. Glide, cross. Your center of gravity has to stay perfectly level. Picture a straight line running from the top of your head down to your feet." Cross tried. He was pretty sure he looked exactly like a guy trying to sneak across a creaky floorboard without waking up the house. "You are projecting profound personal embarrassment," Kellara sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose in a gesture that was shockingly human. "Try to project calm waters. Stillness. Serenity." "I am not calm waters," Cross snapped, stumbling again and almost wiping out. "I'm a guy in a weird tunic trying his best not to trip over his own 2 feet. How am I supposed to project something I don't feel at all?" "You don't project what you feel," she said, her infinite patience starting to fray around the edges. "You become it. Your mind controls your body. Stop thinking about your feet. Think about stillness itself." He tried again, focusing all his concentration. He projected what he really hoped was serene calm. Across the room, Kellara, who was monitoring his empathic broadcast, physically winced. "What now?" Cross asked, completely exasperated. "You're projecting a confused frog?" she said, deadpan. "A confused frog? I don't even know what a confused frog feels like." "Apparently you do," she shot back, and quite vividly. But it was more than just the physical stuff. It was the language, the empathic projection that went along with every Tyrian word. He knew the dictionary definitions, but as Kellara put it with her usual brutal honesty, he was empathically tone-deaf. She'd hold up a data slate with a diplomatic message. "This is a trade proposal from the Tyranni. Read it, and project the proper Tyrian formal response. We acknowledge the offering and perceive its internal complexities." Cross read the words carefully. He took a deep breath. He projected what he thought was diplomatic acknowledgement. Kellara rubbed her temples as if she was trying to ward off a migraine. "Cross, you just projected, 'This is a complete load of garbage, and I would rather eat my own foot than read one more word of this nonsense.'" Well, I was thinking that, Cross admitted. But I didn't mean to project it. I was trying to project the polite version. That is the entire point of Tyrian communication, she said, her patience visibly cracking. There is no difference between thinking and projecting. You have to shut down your internal commentary completely. Control your thoughts at the source. The tension between them was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Cross was failing, constantly and spectacularly, in ways that would have been hilarious if they weren't so diplomatically dangerous. But in the middle of all this failure, something strange started to happen. They were talking. Like, really talking. He was spending hours with her every single day, and little by little he was starting to see the person behind the perfectly sculpted diplomatic mask. He saw her frustration when he messed up, not anger, but a genuine desire for him to succeed. He saw her dry, sharp wit come out when she teased him about the confused frog incident. He saw the incredible intelligence that cut right through his clumsy excuses to the truth underneath. In his own stumbling, awkward way, he was getting to know her. The assassination attempt had thrown Nexus Aegis into a high-security lockdown. For safety, Kalara moved their training sessions to the station's central core, a massive zero-gravity botanical dome that housed an incredible collection of bioluminescent plants from dozens of worlds, all floating freely. It was a carefully maintained sphere of recycled air, and they floated there so Cross could supposedly practice calming his loud mind in a peaceful setting. He was rambling, as usual, floating awkwardly with his arms and legs splayed out all wrong. I still don't get it. Why me? Why keep me around? I wrecked the summit. I almost got you killed. And now because of this truth bond thing, my own people back on Terra think I'm either a traitor or a hostage with some kind of alien Stockholm syndrome. Kalara drifted gracefully through a cloud of sparkling, dandelion-like spores that gave off a soft light. Her simple gray tunic made her look less like royalty and more like a scholar. Her blue skin seemed to glow in the dome's faint, scattered light. You didn't ruin the summit, she said softly, her voice carrying easily in the huge, quiet space. You just jump-started it. You forced it to be honest. She drifted closer, stopping his nervous chatter by holding out her hand, palm up. It was a simple, slender, sky-blue hand that seemed to have its own internal light. Cross just stared at it, confused. What? In your culture, she said quietly, you touch casually. You bare your teeth in smiles, you press skin against skin without a second thought. And it's seen as crude and informal. Correct? Right. Sorry, Cross said, instinctively pulling his own hands back towards his chest. No, she said, her silver eyes locking with his. This is our way, she explained, gesturing to her open palm. To let someone else touch your palm, to feel their empathic static directly. This is intimate, more intimate than what you call kissing. It is sharing a piece of your consciousness. Cross stared at her outstretched hand. It was an invitation. It was also a test. Slowly, with his heart hammering so hard it made his vision pulse, he reached out. His trembling, very human hand, scarred from the fight with the assassin, moved toward her perfect blue one. He paused, his fingers hovering just millimeters from her skin. Then he let his fingertips brush her palm. The jolt that shot up his arm felt like 1,000 volts of static electricity. But it wasn't physical. It was mental, emotional, spiritual. He gasped. He felt her, not her thoughts or her words, but herself, her essence. It was a sudden, crushing wave of loneliness, a cold, deep, Arctic isolation that went straight to her core. Frustration as sharp as broken glass, the immense weight of an entire empire's expectations pressing down on one person. And under all of that, buried deep but unmistakably there, was a tiny spark of warmth, of curiosity, of hope. And it was pointed right at him. Cross snatched his hand back like he'd been burned, stunned silent. I felt what I felt in the concourse, Kalara whispered, her gaze sad and deep. When you spoke your truth, you sent your emotional reality straight to me. It was an unsanctioned touch, but it was a touch. Now you understand what that meant. She just floated there, surrounded by the glowing, drifting alien flowers, a queen trapped in a cage built by her own people. And in that moment, Cross finally, completely understood. He wasn't just her translator. He wasn't just her bodyguard or her diplomatic bond. He was her witness, maybe the only person who had ever truly seen her. They gave me this body to deceive, Kalara whispered, her voice a faint echo in the vast green dome. But you are the first one who ever told the truth about it. The summit started again, but the carefully planned script had been ripped to shreds. The optimism that had once filled Nexus Aegis Station was gone, vaporized. The recycled air in the Grand Concourse no longer tasted flat. It tasted like acid, sharp with tension and barely hidden hostility. The Terran delegation, led by Ambassador Thornwell and a visibly twitchy Director Gisham, stood stiffly on one side. The Tyrians were on the other. But this time, everything was different. Kalara didn't just wait passively for the humans to speak. The moment she entered the room, the subtle change in her posture, no longer the shy diplomatic symbol, but something sharper, more dangerous, sent a clear ripple of alarm through everyone there. Imagine being treated like a machine your whole life, a walking lie detector whose only job is to translate words and feelings. That was my life. And she was a princess, treated like a doll on a shelf, there to look pretty while men decided her planet's fate. They thought we were just a tool and a toy. They were about to find out how wrong they were, and you're not going to want to miss how it all went down. She wasn't some delicate statue anymore. She was a sharpened blade, and I was standing right beside her, as her equal. Ambassador Thornwell, Kara's voice rang out, clear as a bell and amplified through the chamber. My translation was immediate, stripped of all the usual diplomatic fluff. Her Highness Princess Kara acknowledges you. Thornwell tried to get things back on his track, flashing a slimy smile that never reached his eyes. We're so pleased Your Highness has recovered from the unfortunate confusion earlier. Shall we resume our productive chat about the Vaden system's mineral rights? But Kara was done playing his game. Through me, her voice was like ice. Her Highness would like to know why Terra has 3 heavily armed military vessels, which our scans clearly identify, hiding in that system right now. She also wonders if geological survey is the new Terran code word for invasion force. The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was pure, unfiltered political shock. Thornwell's face went ghost white, and his assistant, Gisham, looked like he was about to pass out. That information is classified, Thornwell stammered out. Kara's reply, through me, was instant and sharp. It is not classified. It is an undeclared act of war. She was no longer there to talk about trade. She was there to talk about Terra's hidden military plans. I wasn't just a translator anymore. I had become her secret weapon, a weapon of absolute honesty. Before the meeting, she'd asked me point blank, what do the humans really want? And since I can't lie, I told her, the Vaden minerals. They think you're naive and your father's weak. They plan to take it by force and are using this summit to distract you. She believed me. And now she was taking the Terran delegation apart, piece by piece, using me as her scalpel. She'd look at me, sending a question through our unique empathic link, and I'd whisper back the brutal truth. They're lying. Thornwell is panicking. Gisham is trying to figure out how to spin this. They're terrified you know about their fleet. Kara would just nod, then unleash another devastatingly polite question. It wasn't a negotiation anymore. It was an interrogation, and we were running it. But this new, aggressive stance from a supposedly weak princess didn't go unnoticed. On the 3rd day, the huge doors to the concourse hissed open, and everything changed. The Quori delegation entered. If Kara's people, the Tyrians, were like elegant, sculpted water, the Quori were like living obsidian, carved into monsters. They were huge, encased in black armor that seemed to swallow the light, their faces hidden behind a shifting puzzle of geometric plates that clicked and whirred. They were the other big power in this part of space, a warrior race that saw everyone else as weak and ripe for the picking. Their ambassador, a giant whose voice sounded like two continents grinding together, stepped forward. "This summit is a farce," he boomed, and I felt his raw contempt like a punch to the gut. It was a telepathic sledgehammer, full of disgust. "The Tyrian heir has tainted herself," the Quori ambassador continued, his faceplates clicking menacingly. "She has formed an intimate bond with a crude human. This alliance is a threat to galactic stability. This union, born from weakness, will not stand. This summit is over." It wasn't just a statement. It was an ultimatum. And that night, the real trouble began. First, a communications blackout hit the Tyrian sector. Then, a data bomb corrupted key navigation files. It climaxed with a small but loud explosion in a cargo bay. The Quori immediately blamed it on Terran terrorists trying to scare the Tyrians. The whole station was turning into a powder keg. "They're framing us," I said to Kara. We were locked in her private rooms, with only her two most trusted guards, Hexar and Talax, standing watch. "The Quori are not this subtle," Kara said, studying a data slate. "They smash things. This is too neat, too calculated." The explosion, I realized, my old pattern recognition skills kicking in. It destroyed nothing important. It was designed to look terrifying and create maximum panic with minimum damage. Exactly. It was theater, Kara agreed. Psychological warfare. "And the blackout?" I asked. "It wasn't simple jamming," she said, her fingers flying across her console. "It was a sophisticated reroute. Someone diverted all my private diplomatic messages. Someone on the inside. We couldn't trust anyone. The Terrans were enemies. Her own delegation was sending secret messages home, saying a human had compromised her. We have to find where that signal is going," I said. "If we find the receiver, we find the spy." "The central data core," Kara decided instantly. "In the maintenance levels. We can't take the main lifts, they'll be watching." We moved like ghosts through the station's guts, a world of humming wires and the sharp smell of ozone. We reached the data core, a massive glowing sphere of fiber optics. "There," Kara whispered, pointing at a stream of light on the master console. She'd already bypassed security. "My diplomatic channel. It's being copied and sent somewhere else." She typed a few commands, and coordinates flashed on the screen. "That's not a secure server," I said, frowning. "That's a public terminal, in the Botanical Dome." "Why there?" she wondered. "It's neutral territory," I realized, a chill running down my spine. "Public space. Anyone could use it without being noticed." A silent alarm flashed on Kara's console. "Someone is at that terminal right now," she said. "And they know we're here," I added, spotting a tiny red light on our own console. "They're tracking us. We have to move. Now." We sprinted for a service lift, Kara using her royal override codes. The doors opened directly into the Botanical Dome, a vast, humid space filled with the scent of alien flowers, glowing softly in the dark. In the center, under the massive transparent ceiling showing a distant nebula, a single figure stood at the public terminal. It was Talax, one of her own guards. He wasn't working for Terra or the Quori. He was a Tyrian extremist who believed Kara's alliance with a human was a disgrace. He was trying to start a war to purify the Empire. In the end, honesty wasn't just our best weapon. It was our only one. We exposed Talax, along with Thornwell's invasion plans and the Quori's bullying. Thornwell was recalled in shame. The Quori backed down. And Kara, the naive princess, secured a treaty for her people built on truth, not lies. We learned that true strength isn't about deception or force, but having the courage to trust in honesty and in each other. Have you ever been in a situation so far over your head you couldn't even see the surface anymore? That was me. I'm Cross, a linguist. I study dead languages. I'm not a hero. But when I was assigned to the diplomatic envoy for Princess Kalara, I got thrown into the deep end. One minute we were walking across this stunning observation bridge over floating gardens. The next, the lights went out, and we were plunged into a blood-red nightmare. This wasn't just a random attack, it was an execution, and we were the targets. Stick with me, because how this mess ends is something you won't see coming. "Kill!" I yelled, reaching for her, but it was useless. Figures in black armor dropped from the ceiling like spiders, blocking our escape. They were silent, professional, and they were here for her. "This is not your fight, human," one of them hissed, aiming a rifle right at my head. But before I could even process that I was about to die, Kara shoved me, hard. "Emergency teleport! Service panel! Move!" she yelled. And then, she wasn't a princess anymore. She became a blur of motion, a predator unleashed. In a move so fast I could barely track it, she slammed her palm into one of the assassin's chests. The sound it made wasn't just a crack. It was a shockwave I felt in my bones. The armored figure staggered back, its systems completely fried, while she became a whirlwind of deadly precision. Taking on 2 more of them, I scrambled for the service panel she'd pointed out. I knew this dome. We'd trained here. A searing energy bolt vaporized a patch of flowers right where my head had been a second before, filling the air with the smell of ozone and burnt sugar. "Move, Cross, now!" Kara yelled, her voice strained. She was grace and fury, an apex predator in a diplomatic shell. I reached the panel and ripped it open. The emergency teleport, a drift, they called it, was designed for moving equipment, not people. Using it was basically a coin toss between survival and being turned into chunky salsa. It was our only shot. I slammed my fist on the activation plate, and it started to glow with a sick yellow light. "Charging! 15 seconds!" I shouted. "I don't have 15 seconds!" she screamed back. One of the assassins broke off from the fight and leveled its rifle right at me. I was a deer in the headlights, completely frozen. But Kara saw it. In a move of impossible speed, she threw herself in front of me, taking the shot's path. But a third assassin was already there, lunging with a curved blade that glowed with a dark, terrifying energy. She twisted, but her momentum was off. The blade sliced deep into her side. The sound that escaped her wasn't her usual musical voice. It was a raw gasp of pure agony that cut right through me. "Kara!" I screamed, my voice cracking. Just then, the pad flashed green. "Ready." She kicked the assassin in the knee with a sickening crunch and launched herself backward, tackling me onto the teleport pad. "Hold on!" she gasped, slamming the activation stud. "And Project Calm. If you panic, we atomize." The world dissolved into a feeling of being pulled through a straw, atom by atom. We materialized in a tangled heap in a freezing dark maintenance bay on the station's lowest level. The air smelled like grease and ion filters. I coughed, my whole body feeling like one big bruise. "We made it," I gasped. "I think we actually made it." But Kara didn't answer. I scrambled to my knees and saw her slumped against the wall, her face shockingly pale. My hand went to her side and it came away wet. In the dim red light, I looked at my palm, and my heart stopped. It wasn't red. My hand was covered in a liquid that glowed with a soft silver-blue light. Liquid starlight. Her blood. "Oh, gods," I whispered. I lunged for the main light panel, slapping it on. The wound was a long, dark gash across her ribs, pulsing weakly with that ethereal glow. The unstable teleport had made a bad wound 1,000,000 times worse. "Your Highness, talk to me," I begged. Her silver eyes fluttered open. She looked down at the glowing pool of blood spreading beneath her. She whispered, with a touch of dark humor. "That is a complication. We have to get you to medical, now!" I said, my voice shaking. No, she said, her voice weak but firm. The moment I check in, my father will know. The assassins will know. They'll see it as weakness, and they will finish the job. We're in hiding, Cross. There's no one else. Just you. Just me. A linguist who catalogued dead dialects. I looked at the glowing wound, then at my own hands, shaking so violently I couldn't make a fist. I'm not a doctor, I whispered, the panic rising in my throat like bile. Neither am I, she gasped, a faint smile touching her lips. Emergency medical kit. Wall panel. Left side. I found it and ripped it open. Inside was a bunch of gear with names I barely understood. Biocellular sealer, plasma foam, synthetic skin patches. I don't know what to do, I admitted, my voice breaking. The sealer, she whispered, her eyes closing from the pain. You have to stop the bleeding first. It's very cold. I picked up the biocellular sealer. It looked like an industrial glue gun. Taking a shuddering breath, I gently tore away her blood-soaked tunic. The ugly gash was a brutal contrast to her perfect sky-blue skin. I was no longer seeing a princess. I was seeing a person I cared about, bleeding out in a filthy room because of me. Just be gentle, I muttered to myself. I pressed the nozzle to the edge of the wound and pulled the trigger. The sealer hissed, shooting out a blue foam that smelled like burnt plastic. The reaction was instant and violent. Kara's back arched off the floor as if she'd been electrocuted. A raw, high-pitched scream of pure agony was ripped from her throat, a sound so terrible I almost dropped the tool. I'm sorry, I panicked, pulling the sealer away. Don't stop, she gritted out through clenched teeth, tears tracing luminous paths down her skin. Just finish it. I set my jaw, placed one hand on her shoulder to hold her steady, and drew a slow, agonizing line of sealant along the entire wound. She trembled violently under my hand, her muffled cries echoing in the small room. When it was done, the glowing had stopped. The foam was hardening into a black, rubbery patch. She lay panting, completely spent. But she was alive. I had done it. We hid for hours, but I knew hiding wasn't enough. We needed revenge. Staring at the maintenance panel, I noticed the command language wasn't standard. It was an ancient Tyrian dialect I'd studied for years. That's when I realized I wasn't helpless. My mind was my weapon. I accessed the station's old logs, found the assassin's encrypted comms, and cracked the code using a linguistic riddle. I found out who hired them, a rival duke, and sent a fake message, luring them into a cargo bay. I then used an old emergency protocol to vent that bay into space. I learned something that day. Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being terrified and doing what needs to be done anyway. And sometimes, the quietest man in the room can make the most noise. They were expecting us. This whole thing was a setup. The Quarai are just mindless thugs, Kara whispered, her voice slowly finding its strength again. They're mercenaries. Someone hired them. But who? This isn't about mining rights anymore, Cross said, a cold certainty creeping into his voice. They weren't trying to grab you. That blade was meant to kill, to make sure you were gone for good. He peered at her through the gloom, her outline barely visible except for the faint glow from the medical patch on her side. Kara, why would someone try so hard to kill you? This feels way bigger than just politics. She was quiet for what felt like an eternity. He could only hear the sound of her breathing, slow, steady, and deliberate. In my culture, she finally began, her voice low, an heir is a promise. A promise? A promise of what? Of peace, an alliance, political stability, she answered, a sharp bitterness lacing her words. My entire life has been a transaction, a tool for diplomacy. First they engineered my body, and then they sold my future. I've been engaged since I was born, a political merger planned before I even knew how to talk. Engaged? Cross felt a knot tighten in his gut. To who? Lord Valerix, she said, the name escaping her lips like a foul taste. He's a high noble of the Tyrian court, powerful ambitious, and cruel. He doesn't want an alliance with my people. He wants my father's throne, and he wants me as a prize to lock it down." The ugly truth hit Cross like a wave of icy water. "So Valerix hired the Squarai," he pieced together, "to take you out and make it look like it was our fault, or like the Quarai were acting on their own. In the middle of all that chaos, he'd make his move for the throne." "He's been waiting for the perfect moment," Kara confirmed. "And our new alliance with Terra, through you, threatens every last one of his plans. He needs me out of the picture, permanently." For Cross, a man who always acted on instinct, a pure white-hot rage burned through him unlike anything he'd ever felt. He no longer saw a princess, but a prisoner, bleeding in the dark, promised to a monster and forced to live a lie. "Then just run," Cross blurted out, the words escaping before he could think. "Just leave. We can find a ship. I can get us to the outer colonies. You don't have to marry him. You can actually be free." It was a hopelessly naive offer, and he knew it the second he said it. Kara slowly turned her head in the darkness. He couldn't make out her eyes, but he could feel her gaze on him, feel that strange, static-like connection between them. It was warm. He felt a wave of her gratitude, followed by a deep current of sadness. Then he felt her resolve harden, that core of unbreakable determination snapping back into place. "I'm not running," she whispered, but her voice was like steel. The moment of weakness had passed. The injured woman was gone, replaced by the heir to an empire. "He expects me to be a victim, a pawn to be traded, a prize to be won. I'm done running. I'm done being anyone's tool." She forced herself into a sitting position, clearly ignoring the sharp pain from her wound. "I intend to win." The bond between them felt stronger in that moment, forged in the heat of the fight, sealed with her glowing blood, and hardened by a shared goal. He finally saw her, truly saw her. But her duty remained a wall between them, thicker than any starship hull. She was royalty. He was just Cross, a linguist who had tripped and fallen into the middle of galactic warfare. "We need proof," she stated, her tone shifting to pure business. "Proof that Valerix hired those thugs. Proof that he has a spy on this station. Someone who knew we'd be in the data core. Someone who walked us right into that trap." They moved back through the service tunnels, this time with Kara leaning heavily on Cross to save her strength. They avoided her sector completely, knowing it was probably being watched. They had to get to her private chambers and her secure console. It was the only place with the encryption they needed. They used a hidden maintenance panel Cross had noticed during one of his boring etiquette lessons, which was cleverly hidden behind a massive tapestry in her meditation room. They slipped into the room, which was dark and silent, but not empty. A lone figure was standing at Kara's main console, their face illuminated by the faint blue light of the screen. The person was typing furiously, digging through the same diplomatic files Kara had been studying. Her supposedly loyal guards, Hexar and Talax, were nowhere in sight, obviously lured away on purpose. The figure at the console wasn't one of her people. It wasn't one of the Quarai. It was human. And Cross recognized her immediately. It was Lissa, one of Kara's human attendants, the one who brought her water, arranged her gowns, and had given Cross a warm smile just yesterday. Before Kara could even react, Cross stepped out of the shadows. "Lissa." The woman spun around, her face twisting into a mask of pure panic. She slammed her hand down on the console, frantically trying to erase what she'd been doing. "Stop her!" Kara commanded. But Cross just stood there, staring, as all the horrible pieces clicked into place. "The human assassin who attacked you in your room days ago," he said, his voice sounding hollow and distant. "The sabotage that was just a little too perfect. The trap in the data core." He looked at Lissa, then at Kara. "The assassin was human. The person spying on your data stream. Lissa, it was you. It was you all along." Kara looked from the terrified attendant back to Cross, her silver eyes widening with a dawning, sickening horror. "The betrayal," Kara whispered, her hand reflexively covering the patch on her side. "It didn't just come from my own court." "No," Cross said, his eyes locked on the spy. "It came from Terra. It came from us." Catching the spy wasn't a victory. It was like pulling the pin on a grenade. Lissa didn't even try to fight. She just collapsed to her knees, her face pale with terror. Kara, leaning on Cross for support, stared at the woman who had served her, smiled at her, and secretly plotted to have her killed. "Why?" Kara's voice was barely audible. But before Lissa could answer, the chamber doors blasted open. This time it wasn't assassins. It was Ambassador Thornwell and Director Gisham, backed by a full squad of Terran security. Lissa must have tripped a silent alarm. They burst in, weapons raised, and then froze, taking in a scene that looked bad from every possible angle. The princess was clearly injured, her clothes torn and stained with her own glowing blood. The supposedly renegade translator was holding her up, his arm wrapped around her waist, his face a mask of cold fury. And the human attendant, Lissa, was on her knees like a captured criminal. Gisham's panicked mind could only interpret the scene one way. "He attacked her!" Gisham shrieked, pointing an accusing finger at Cross. "I knew it! He's a psycho! This is sedition! Assault! He's hurt the princess! Arrest him now! Stand down!" Kara's voice, though weak, cut through the room like a whip. In that same instant, Hexar and Talix, her two truly loyal guards, seemed to melt out of the shadows like ghosts, their energy pikes aimed squarely at the Terran soldiers. "He saved my life," Kara spat, her silver eyes burning with fury. "From her," she finished, nodding toward Lissa. Ambassador Thornwell's eyes went wide as the terrible truth hit him. He looked at Lissa's panicked face, then at the data slate still lit up on Kara's console. Thornwell was no fool. He understood exactly what had happened in one soul-crushing moment. The betrayal came from his own people. Every last drop of color drained from his face. The summit wasn't just in trouble. It was destroyed. The entire, delicate political agreement shattered like a cheap watch smashed with a hammer. The story broke on the news feeds an hour later, and it landed with the force of an asteroid. But it was the wrong story. It was the complete opposite of what really happened. Terra's diplomatic team went into full damage control. They couldn't admit their own spy had been caught trying to arrange an assassination. So they spun a whole new tale. The headline that flashed across every screen was a bombshell. Terran translator implicated in violent kidnapping of Tyrian princess. The story they fabricated was simple, believable, and a total lie. They painted Cross as a crude human who, blinded by ambition, had taken advantage of the alien princess. They claimed he had used his unique access to her mind to create a fake telepathic bond, a sort of psychic manipulation to turn her against her own people. They said he was trying to steal the valuable mineral rights for himself. That fight in the gardens? They said Cross had attacked Kara's guards, and Lissa, the traitorous attendant, was now a heroic whistleblower who tried to warn everyone before Cross silenced her. Have you ever been blamed for something you didn't do? Not just blamed, but had your face plastered across the entire galaxy, painted as a monster? That's what happened to Theron Cross. One minute, he's a simple translator. The next, he's public enemy number one, accused of seducing a princess and sabotaging a peace summit. The real story? He was the only one brave enough to tell Princess Kalara that the very air in her room was slowly killing her. Now he and the princess are trapped in her suite, the whole station howling for their blood. If you think that's bad, it's about to get a whole lot worse. Stick with me to see how they get out of this. A guard named Hexar enters, his face like granite. "Your Highness," he says, his voice low and heavy. "Your father's flagship, the Ascendant, just left our homeworld. It'll be here in 8 hours." Kalara's heart freezes. The Ascendant isn't a passenger ship, it's a warship, powerful enough to blow the station to bits. She whispers, "His orders?" Hexar's eyes flick to Cross, cold and unforgiving. "He's ordered an Imperial extraction. We're to take you by force. And Mr. Cross is to be neutralized on sight." Neutralized. A clean, neat word for being turned into a pile of ash. Cross feels the world disappear from under his feet. "So that's it," Cross says, the air knocked out of him. "Your dad drags you home like a prize. My government wants my head. And the real villain gets away with everything." Kalara pushes herself off the wall, a sharp gasp of pain escaping her lips. The ugly wound on her side, the one Cross discovered, sends a jolt of agony through her. For her whole life, she's been a symbol, a thing to be traded and controlled. She looks at Cross, not a schemer, just a terrified, honest man who, against all odds, saw her. A switch flips inside her. "No," she says, her voice quiet but firm. Cross looks at her, confused. "No?" he asks. "They've all been telling their stories," Kalara says, a fire lighting in her silver eyes. "The story of the scandalous human, the story of the compromised princess, the story of a failed treaty." She stands up straighter. "It's time they heard my story." Cross is stunned. "What are you going to do?" She gives him a small, determined smile. "I'm going to do what you did, Cross. I'm going to be honest." She turns to her loyal guards. "The station's emergency broadcast center. Get us there. Now." Without a word, the two guards nod. It wasn't a request. It was a command from their true leader. Their desperate sprint through the station's hidden passages had begun. Alarms blare as security forces smash into the empty royal suite. Meanwhile, Kalara's team bursts into the broadcast center, a small, cold room where a single technician is shaking like a leaf. This area is restricted," he stammers. Kalara ignores him, striding to the main console. "Activate the emergency broadcast. All channels, all frequencies. Now." The technician looks like he's about to faint. I can't. That needs a level 1 ambassadorial override. That's only for solar flares or war." "This is war," Kalara says, her voice flat. She places her palm flat on the console. "Imperial mandate. Heir apparent Kalara. Override authorization." A soft chime confirms her identity. The technician's jaw drops. The system, recognizing an authority higher than any politician, unlocks everything. All at once, every screen on the station, on warships, in corporate boardrooms, and in bars on Mars, which had been showing Cross's face with the word "criminal," snaps to black. A second later, one single image appears everywhere, the station's emergency emblem. Then the image changes and Kalara steps in front of the camera. She looks nothing like a princess. Her clothes are torn and stained with blood. The crude black line of the medical sealer on her side is visible for everyone to see. She's pale, exhausted, and in pain, but she looks powerful. She looks real. Standing just out of frame, Cross feels his heart pound so hard he thinks it might break. Then she begins to speak, her voice clear and strong, echoing across hundreds of worlds. "I am Kalara, heir to the Tyrian throne. You have been told many stories in the last few hours," she continues, letting her words sink in. "Now you will hear the truth." She looks right into the camera as if making eye contact with every single person watching. Then, in a move that shocks the entire galaxy, she reaches off-screen and pulls Theron Cross right into the spotlight. He stumbles, his eyes wide with panic. "This is Translator Theron Cross," she announces, placing a hand on his arm. "He has been accused of manipulating me." She turns to face him, her voice becoming soft and personal. "He looked at my body," she says, "and he spoke the truth. It was a truth that no one else, not my royal court, not the ambassadors, not a single diplomat, had the courage to say." On the bridge of the Ascendant, Kalara's father, the Emperor, watches with a face like stone. In the station's command center, Ambassador Thornwell screams, "Cut the feed! Cut the feed now!" But it's too late. Kalara turns back to the camera, her voice rising with power. "I am not a symbol," she declares, the wound on her side a dark testament to her words. "I am not a tool to be traded for mineral rights. I am not for sale." She takes one final step toward the camera, her gaze piercing through the screen. "And I am not ashamed of being seen." For a single, stretched-out second, the galaxy is completely silent. Then, chaos erupts. Ambassador Thornwell is shouting frantic, useless orders. The scheming Quarai ambassador smashes a console with his fist, roaring in fury. The political games that had governed trillions of lives were tearing themselves apart in real time, all because one person decided to be honest. On the bridge of his approaching warship, Emperor Thyron speaks a single word: halt. Back in the broadcast room, the feed finally cuts, and red emergency lights begin to flash. "They're here," Hexer says grimly. "Security is at the main door." They were trapped. "We can't go back," Cross says. "Then we go forward," Kalara replies. They burst through a side door and find themselves fugitives, the two most wanted people in the sector. But as a squad of soldiers blocks their path, a nearby door hisses open. A young diplomat whispers, "In here, quickly." It was a junior diplomat named Mira. She had seen the broadcast. She believed Kalara. She guides them through secret passages, explaining how the station is being locked down. A little further, their path is blocked by a sealed pressure door. A Tyrian technician from a low class is working on the panel. He sees Kalara, and his eyes fill not with fear, but with admiration. With a determined look, he hits an override switch, and the door slides open. Kalara's words were like a spark, lighting fires of courage in people who had been ignored for too long. They finally reached the Botanical Dome, the beautiful, zero-gravity garden where this whole mess started. It's the only safe place left. Her guards take up a defensive position at the entrance, ready to seal the door with their lives. Inside, among the slowly drifting, glowing alien flowers, Kalara and Cross are finally alone. The alarms outside are muffled, distant and dreamlike. For one moment, they are safe. Kalara lets out a breath she feels like she's been holding her entire life. "That broadcast," she whispers, her voice filled with awe. "It was the first time I have ever spoken my own words. I was so scared." Before Cross can answer, a message appears on a nearby console. The Emperor's warship wasn't attacking. It was requesting permission to dock a single shuttle. Her father had heard her, and so had the galaxy. The people who framed Cross were arrested. The peace talks restarted, but this time on honest terms. And Kalara, no longer a prize to be won, was finally free to write her own story, with a brave translator by her side. The moral of the story? One voice speaking the truth can be more powerful than an entire army, and true strength isn't about being perfect, but about having the courage to show your scars. "Those were good words," Cross said, floating a little closer until she stopped him with a hand on his chest. "You were honest about my body," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But I haven't been completely honest with you." "Not completely, Cross?" "I saw you bleeding," he argued. "No," she said. "You saw the wound, but you didn't see me. You saw the shell they built, the lie I've had to wear every single day since I was just a girl." She took a shaky breath. "In my speech, I said I wasn't ashamed of being seen, but I've never let anyone truly see me." And right there, floating in the quiet starlight, surrounded by silent, drifting flowers, she did the bravest thing she had ever done. She reached for the seals on her gray, blood-stained tunic. This wasn't an act of seduction. It was the grim, quiet finality of a soldier stripping off their armor, or a prisoner shedding a uniform they despise. She pulled the tunic off, letting it float away into the darkness. Cross's breath hitched in his throat. This was not the body from the reception ceremony. She was still blue, still luminous, but the flawless curves, the sculpted form designed to inspire awe and disarm threats, it was gone. In its place was her true self. She was thinner, more angular. Her limbs were long, elegant, and sharp. She was a creature of speed and lethal grace, not a piece of diplomatic art. She looked more alien than ever, and to him, she was more beautiful than he could have possibly imagined. But that wasn't the whole story. The rest of the truth was laced across her skin in faint, glowing lines, a spider's web running just beneath her blue skin, along her ribs, down her arms, and over her shoulders. It was a subcutaneous lattice, a biotech framework for the form she wore, that perfect diplomatic body. Cross realized it wasn't just genetic engineering. It was a hard-light nanoprojection, a costume literally grafted onto her, one she could never, ever take off. Until now. She was trembling, floating before him, completely and utterly exposed. This was her shame. This was the lie she'd told him about. "This," she whispered, "is the truth. The tool, the weapon they made." Cross was silent. He didn't look away, didn't flinch. He just saw her. He floated closer, his own calloused human hands shaking. He didn't touch her body. He gently touched the faint, glowing lines of the biotech on her ribs, just inches from the ugly black bioseal. "They told you this was a weapon," Cross whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "They were wrong. You are the weapon." He gestured to the technology embedded in her skin. This is just Kiara." And he kissed her. It wasn't a human kiss, full of heat and demand. It was slow. It was a question. It was pure reverence. She answered. Her cold, alien hands came up to grip his shoulders, pulling him closer as the bond between them, the Ishtal, didn't just hum, it sang. This wasn't the desperate, frantic coupling of two fugitives before a battle. It was soft, gentle, and real, there in the zero gravity. They were clumsy. As Cross tried to hold her properly, he bumped his head hard on a floating piece of cultivated coral. A sharp thwack echoed through the dome. Kiara pulled back, startled, and then she laughed. Not a smile, not a regal little chime, but a full, clear, sudden laugh of pure, surprised amusement. The sound was so unexpected, so genuine, it shocked them both into silence. Cross just stared at her, and then he broke into a smile. "A confused frog," he whispered. "A blunt object," she replied, and they came together again. It was the way two souls who have been lost in the dark their entire lives finally find a hand to hold. It was deep, it was slow, and it was happening in the middle of a station-wide manhunt, full of tension, unexpected laughter, and an impossible, healing softness. Much later, they floated together, limbs tangled in a cloud of glowing flowers. The station's alarms were just a distant throbbing pulse. The peace was temporary. The warship was still on its way. Cross was gently tracing the faint, glowing lines of the biotech framework on her arm. His mind, for once, was finally, blessedly silent. Kiara was watching him, her silver eyes soft in the dim, bioluminescent light. "You are the only one," she said quietly, "who has ever seen this, seen me, and not looked away." "It's hard to look away," Cross murmured, his voice heavy with feeling. She smiled, a real, genuine smile, and pulled his head down to rest on her shoulder. Her skin was cool to the touch, but her presence radiated a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. "You didn't worship the engineered form," she whispered, her voice filled with an emotion that was new and deep and completely true. You honored the truth inside it. The person. That's what made all the difference. The quiet in the botanical dome was a lie, a stolen moment of peace. Outside, Nexus Aegis wasn't just fractured anymore. It was screaming. Kiara, now dressed in a spare, dark blue Tyrian utility suit she'd kept hidden for emergencies, stood at a public access terminal in the dome. Hexer and Talak stood like obsidian statues at the entrance, watching for any threats. Cross stood beside her, his heart a cold, heavy lump in his chest. The emergency broadcast was over. The station, and the star systems beyond, were in absolute freefall. War wasn't just looming anymore. It was here, displayed in stark clarity on the tactical screens. They watched the feeds with a growing sense of dread. The Terran fleet, led by the heavy cruiser Leonidas Prime, had broken formation and was moving aggressively to blockade the station. On the display, they looked like a swarm of angry hornets. Approaching from the opposite direction was a single, terrifying Tyrian signature, the Ascendant, Emperor Thyron's flagship. It was massive, cold, and most ominously, it wasn't slowing down. Trust had completely collapsed. Kiara's broadcast, her raw, painful confession, had not united the galaxy in understanding. Instead, it had drawn new, harder battle lines. Terra Command, led by a humiliated Ambassador Thornwell, was doubling down on their false narrative. Their new spin was that the compromised Tyrian heir, in a fit of delusion brought on by her human seducer, had fabricated all the data. They were declaring her mentally unstable, a hostage who needed to be liberated. They wanted Cross's head, and they were willing to rescue the princess to get it. The Tyrian side was somehow even worse. Kalara's public confession about her biotech-engineered form had horrified the Tyrian court. It was a state secret of the highest order. She hadn't just exposed a conspiracy, she had exposed their deepest cultural shame. Lord Valor, her betrothed, had seized the narrative with ruthless efficiency. He was now broadcasting directly to the fleet, claiming that Kiara had been defiled and broken by the human. He was declaring her unfit to rule and positioning himself as the rightful heir. Both sides, for entirely different reasons, wanted the same thing. Kiara silenced permanently, and Cross dead right alongside her. "They're twisting it," Cross said, his voice a low, angry rasp. "They're using your honesty as proof that you're unstable." "It's what they've always done," Kiara said, her face pale, the wound in her side throbbing with a dull agony beneath a black bioseal. "They hide their own lies behind my truth. Turn reality into gaslighting." She turned away from the screen, her jaw set. "We have the what, Cross? We know Valor hired the quarry. We know Terra had a spy embedded. But we don't have the how. We don't have the hard proof that definitively connects them." "Lisa," Cross said instantly. "The attendant. She was at your console. She was communicating with someone." "She's in Terran custody now," Hexar rumbled from his post at the doorway. "Thornwell has her locked down in their sector." "She is," Kiara agreed grimly. "But her data isn't. We have to go back to my suite, back to my personal console." Cross stared at her. "That's the first place they'll look for us." "It's a trap." "It's the only place," Kiara said, her silver eyes as hard as steel. "That console is biometrically keyed to me. Only I can access the deep system logs. We need that final link. We need irrefutable proof." It was a suicidal dash through hostile territory. Hexar and Talak moved first, using tactical misdirection. Cross had learned that Tyrian warriors weren't just guards. They were artists of deception and combat psychology. Hexar detonated a small, high-energy charge in a power conduit 2 sectors away. Alarm screamed. Terran security, already on edge, scrambled frantically, believing it was a Tyrian sabotage attempt. In the chaos that followed, they moved like ghosts through the station's service corridors, the metal arteries and veins of Nexus Aegis. Kiara moved with pain, but with an absolutely determined grace. Cross was no longer the stumbling, awkward, confused frog of his early training. He was focused, his movements mirroring hers with learned precision. They reached her suite. It was empty, dark, a tomb waiting to be sealed. "They've been here," Kalara whispered, pointing to a faint layer of forensic scanner dust that coated the entire floor. "Evidence collection in progress." "Get in, get the data, and get out," Cross urged quietly. Kiara placed her palm on the console. It hummed to life instantly, recognizing her biometrics. She quickly bypassed the amateur security locks that Thornwell's tech team had tried to install. "They were clumsy," she murmured with cold satisfaction. Her fingers were a blur, flying across the interface as she plunged deep into the system's code. Cross kept his eyes on the door, every nerve in his body screaming with tension. Even the distant hiss of a ventilation system sounded like enemy footsteps closing in. "I have it," Kara announced, her voice tight with a mix of excitement and pressure. "Lisa was careless, wasn't she? She didn't properly wipe her cache." "What is it?" Cross asked, his gaze still locked on the hallway. "It's using some kind of non-standard encryption. I recognize the algorithm." Kara's fingers moved even faster. "This isn't Terran tech. It's Tyrian. Specifically, it's High Court protocol." Cross breathed out the name. "Valerix." "Oh, it's deeper than that," Kara said, her voice dropping to an ominous whisper. "It's his private seal, the one he uses for his personal financial accounts." Lisa was talking directly to him, going around all the official channels. A new window popped up on her console, showing a long log of encrypted messages. Cross finally moved from the door to look over her shoulder, watching the damning evidence scroll by. It was all right there. The entire conspiracy laid out in plain sight. The first message was from Valerix to a Terran contact he didn't know. "The Vaden minerals are yours. The price is the heir. She must be removed." The reply came from a signature Cross recognized immediately. It belonged to Ambassador Thornwell's chief of staff. "Asset Lysa is in place. We will provide the operational window. Your Quarai operatives must not fail." And then the final message appeared, the one that made Cross's blood turn to ice in his veins. It was a direct order from Valerix to Lysa, sent just a few hours before the ambush at the Botanical Dome. "Ensure the heir does not survive the confrontation. Blame the human translator. The Emperor will have his war, and I will have his throne." It wasn't two separate plots happening at the same time. It was one single conspiracy. Valerix, consumed by his hunger for power, had promised Terra the entire Vaden system. In exchange, Thornwell's group would provide an inside agent, Lysa, to help him assassinate Kara and frame Cross, starting the exact war Valerix needed to take over the Tyrian Empire in the chaos that followed. "He wasn't just trying to kill you," Cross said, his voice completely hollow with shock. "He was selling you out. Selling out his entire species for a throne." "He has betrayed everyone," Kara whispered, her face becoming a mask of cold, hard fury. With hands that trembled slightly, she copied the files onto a secure data chip. "And now everyone will know." "We can't just walk into the Grand Concourse and show it to them," Cross said, thinking practically. "They'll shoot us on sight. Both sides want us dead." "No," Kara said, her eyes lighting up with a sudden idea. "We don't have to physically present anything." She spun back to the console, filled with a new sense of purpose. "Lisa left her back door open, the high-security channel she used to talk to Valerix. It completely bypasses the station's main communications network, and it's still active." "You're going to broadcast again," Cross realized. "I'm going to send a data bomb," she corrected him with a grim sense of satisfaction. "I'm sending it to every government database, every news feed, and every ship in both fleets, all at the same time. They wanted a story? I'll give them the ending. The truth they can't spin or bury." But she didn't just attach the communication logs that proved Valerix's treason. She paused, her hand hovering over the send key. "Kara?" Cross asked softly. She looked up at him, her expression suddenly vulnerable. The memory of their night together in the dome was a powerful, unspoken thing between them. "My first broadcast was just words," she said quietly. "But they're still spinning it, calling me a liar, saying I'm mentally unstable or compromised. Words can be dismissed. I need to give them more." She turned back to the console and opened a new file, a deeply encrypted archive of her personal biometric data. "What is that?" Cross asked. "My truth," she said simply. "All of it." With methodical precision, she started attaching files, complete schematics, medical logs from her entire life, the original Project Luminina directives from her court, the full documentation of her bioengineering, the hardlight and nanite blueprints for the diplomatic form she was forced to wear, and finally, her own recorded statement, not a public speech, but a formal Tyrian legal affidavit confessing the manipulation and violation of her own body by her government. "Kara, are you absolutely sure about this?" Cross asked, his voice gentle with concern. "This is everything, every secret. You're showing them the very body they tried to hide." "All of it. Valerix used my engineered form as a weapon against me," she said, her hands now perfectly steady with conviction. "Now I'll use it as a weapon against him. They need to see the whole truth, the cage they built for me, the lie I was forced to live my entire life." She hit the transmit key with finality. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then across the entire Nexus Aegis station, rippling outwards through the void at the speed of light, every screen, every console, and every personal data slate lit up at once. It wasn't just a speech. It was a data tsunami, an undeniable, overwhelming flood of irrefutable proof. The reaction wasn't stunned silence. It was a psychic scream that echoed across entire civilizations. On the bridge of the Ascendant, Emperor Thyron Velcaris watched the data pour across his command screens. He saw the complete schematics of his own daughter's biotech alterations. He saw Valerix's personal seal on the assassination orders. His ancient stoic face didn't just crack, it shattered with a cold, pure rage. "Arrest Lord Valerix," he commanded. "Immediately, and I want him alive." On Leonidas Prime, Terran Captain Chen saw his superior's signature directly linked to an alien assassination plot. A mutiny started to brew among his crew. Officers who signed up to defend Terra, not to commit war crimes. On Terros Prime, the High Court erupted into total chaos. The noble families loyal to Valerix were horrified, not by his treason, but by the fact that Kara had revealed their state secrets about biotech. But the common people saw something different. A princess who had been enslaved by her own government. Sympathy for her ignited like a wildfire. The galaxy was in shock. Millions sided with her instantly. Millions more, furious after decades of deception, demanded justice. Kara hadn't won yet. She had just kicked a cosmic hornet's nest. Her console, still connected to the open channel, flashed with an incoming message. It wasn't encrypted. It was a public declaration from Valerix himself, broadcasting from a Tyrian destroyer that had broken away from the main fleet. His smooth, cruel voice, dripping with enraged entitlement, filled the room. "You are not an heir. You are an abomination, a traitor to your own blood, showing our most sacred secrets to crude aliens. You will not live to see your father. I promise you that." The message cut out. An alarm blared on Kara's console. "Proximity alert." "He's not waiting for anyone's permission," Kara whispered. "Hexar!" Cross yelled into his comlink. "We see them." Hexar's voice crackled back instantly. "Black armor. No official insignia. They just bypassed the sector lockdown with military-grade override codes. They're coming straight for you. Professional hunters." Valerix hadn't just sent a threat. He had unleashed his private guard, Mercenaries and bounty hunters who were already on the station paid very well to do one thing: kill Kara and kill the human who dared to uncover the truth. "We have to move, right now," Cross said, grabbing the data chip and shoving it in his pocket. "Where can we go?" "The outer docking rings," Kara said without hesitation, clutching her wounded side. "It's our only option. The freighter docks run on independent power. We can steal a ship." It was a desperate run through total chaos. They burst out of the suite just as Hexar and Talax started laying down covering fire. The station was in complete pandemonium. Alarms were blaring from every direction. Civilians were screaming and running in panic. Cross and Kara weren't invisible ghosts anymore. They were the prey, and everyone knew it. As they ran through the public concourses, they saw a squad of black-armored hunters up ahead, firing stun bolts into the crowd to try and flush them out. Hexar and Talax returned fire, their Tyrian energy pikes slicing through the air with the clean hiss of superheated plasma. "This way!" Cross yelled, pulling Kara down a cargo lift shaft. They tumbled out into the outer docking rings, a massive, cold, and cavernous space filled with industrial gantries, towering stacks of cargo containers, and the silent, hulking shapes of docked freighters. The only light came from flashing red emergency strobes and the vast, starry expanse of space visible through the viewports. And they were not alone. The bounty hunters were already here, waiting for them. "Ambush!" Hexar roared as laser fire erupted from the gantries high above. It was a brutal, close-quarters firefight. Hexar and Talax formed a defensive perimeter, their energy pikes glowing a brilliant blue as they deflected incoming shots with superhuman speed. 2 Tyrian warriors against at least a dozen professional killers. "The shuttle!" Cross pointed desperately to a small, sleek courier ship at the end of Docking Bay 5. "Go! Run!" They ran. Cross was practically carrying Kara by now. The strain had reopened her wound. She was gasping for breath, leaving faint, glowing spots of blue bioluminescent blood on the metal floor, marking their trail. They were almost there, just 10 more meters to safety. A hunter perched on a high gantry ignored Hexar's covering fire and took careful, deliberate aim. He wasn't aiming at Cross. He was aiming at Kara. He fired a heavy plasma bolt, the kind designed to punch through a starship's engine. Cross saw it all happen in slow motion. The hunter wasn't aiming directly for Kara. He was aiming for the gantry support structure right above their heads. "Kara, move!" he screamed, watching as the support strut glowed cherry red and then sheared completely in two. Imagine being hunted for telling the truth. That was the nightmare Kara and her bodyguard, Cross, were living. They had evidence that could shatter an empire, and for that they were marked for death. Their only way out was a single escape shuttle, but as a massive chunk of the space station ripped free and came crashing down on them, it looked like their time was up. Cross only had a split second to act. What he did next would change everything. Without a second thought, he tackled Kara, sending her flying onto the shuttle ramp just as tons of twisted metal slammed down where she'd been standing. It was a horrifying sound, a final crushing crunch that ended with a scroinsum cut short. Kara scrambled up, her blood running cold. She looked back and saw nothing but wreckage. Then she saw it, his hand reaching for her before it went limp in a spreading pool of blood. As a sniper took aim to finish her off, something inside her broke. A sound ripped from her throat, not a word, but a raw, primal scream of psychic rage that fried the minds of every enemy soldier in sight. They dropped like puppets with their strings cut. Her 2 loyal guards, Hexar and Talax, quickly handled the rest. The docking bay fell silent, filled only by the sound of Kara's ragged breaths. "Cross!" she screamed, clawing at the metal with her bare hands. "Hexar, help me!" Together, they heaved the largest piece of debris aside. He was underneath, completely crushed. His chest was caved in, his makeshift armor shattered. He wasn't breathing. "No," Kara whispered, falling to her knees beside him. Not you. Please, not you. Just as all hope seemed lost, his eyes fluttered open. A painful, bloody smile touched his lips. Kara, he rasped, his voice a wet rattle. You're safe. That was it. That was the last straw. No, she said, her voice no longer a plea, but a command that echoed with ancient power. Hexar, Talax, guard that ramp. No one gets near us. The guards saw a look in her eyes, something terrifying and unstoppable, and obeyed without question. Kara leaned over Cross. In that moment, she wasn't a diplomat or a soldier. She was something else entirely. Placing her blue hands on his ruined chest, she whispered, "You reached into my mind. You saw my truth when no one else would." Silver tears streamed down her face. Now I'll show you mine. The glowing lines under her skin, a biotech framework she'd always seen as a cage, didn't just flicker. They erupted. A column of pure white light shot out from her, so bright it completely drowned out the station's red emergency alarms. This was forbidden. She was tapping into an ancient power, the Ishtilai, a true bond between souls. She was pouring her own life force directly into him. It was a healing art lost for centuries, one that required an unbreakable connection forged in absolute trust, and it came with a permanent price. Cross's body arched off the floor as he felt fire and ice course through him. He could feel his own shattered bones grinding and knitting themselves back together at an impossible speed. He took a shuddering gasp as his crushed lungs reinflated. His eyes shot open, and he saw her, glowing like a dying star. A beautiful, terrible angel. And he could feel her. The bond between them was no longer just a connection. It was a steel cable, permanent and unbreakable. He felt her crushing exhaustion, the reopening of her own wounds, her grief that he had almost died for her, and beneath it all, an overwhelming tidal wave of love that crashed right into his soul. The brilliant light finally faded. Kara collapsed onto his newly healed chest, completely spent. The energy surge had burned away her diplomatic disguise, revealing her true, angular alien form. Cross instinctively sat up and wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight. He was whole, stronger than ever, but he was no longer just himself, and she was no longer just Kara. They were now two minds sharing one life, forever linked. "I've got you," he breathed, his voice steady. "Your Highness, the shuttle!" Hexar urged. "We can leave right now!" Freedom was just a few feet away, a new life, far from the lies and the politics. Cross looked down at Kara, pale and weak, but still fighting in his arms. "Kara," he said gently, "we can go. We can be free." She took a long, shaky breath, drawing strength from him through their new bond. She glanced at the shuttle, at the promise of safety. Then she looked back down the dark corridor toward the center of the station, where her father and the other conspirators were still waiting. "No," she whispered, her voice weak, but her will made of pure iron. "We ran. We hid. We broadcast the truth, and it only made them more desperate." With his help, she struggled to her feet. "It's not enough to send the truth from a distance, Cross. We have to be the truth, right to their faces." "Go back?" he asked, his heart sinking. "They'll kill us." "They'll try," she agreed, now standing on her own. She was no longer a polished princess. She was her true self, wounded, exhausted, and absolutely terrifying in her resolve. "My father is here. The whole galaxy is watching. It's time to end this." She started walking back into the lion's den. Hexar and Talax fell in behind her, their loyalty absolute. Cross walked beside her, amazed by this impossible, brave woman. She reached out and took his hand, not in the formal way of her people, but in the human way, Skin on skin. Let's show them the body they tried to bury, Kara said, her voice echoing down the hall, and the soul they could never crush. Their walk back wasn't a retreat. It was an invasion. The four of them, Kara in her true form, Cross healed by her forbidden power, and their two loyal guards, marched through the chaos. Security forces would run into them, stop, and just stare. They had orders to hunt a princess, not this glowing, determined alien queen and the human ghost walking by her side. They had no idea what to do. When they reached the grand concourse, her father was on a giant screen, blaming the station's chaos on traitors. He froze when he saw her. Kara didn't say a word. She looked at Cross, and through their bond, they did something incredible. They projected the truth, the raw, undeniable evidence of the conspiracy, not onto a screen, but directly into the minds of every single person in the room. People gasped, clutching their heads as they didn't just see the crime, they felt the truth of it. The conspiracy collapsed in an instant. There's no defense against a truth you feel in your own soul. In the end, they learned that the greatest power isn't a weapon or a title, but a bond of truth so strong it can't be broken. Cross could feel their shock, their fear, and their awe ripple through their shared bond. He felt Sierra's hand in his. It was cool, steady, and completely unshakable. She didn't pause, didn't slow her pace, and offered no explanation. She simply walked forward with an undeniable air of command, and the squads of armored soldiers, both Terran and Tyrian, parted before her like a river flowing around a rock. They finally reached the massive, pressure-sealed doors of the Grand Concourse. This was the exact spot where it all began, where Cross had blurted out the words that shattered all diplomatic rules. But now, they were back to tear down the entire rotten system. Hexar laid his hand on the access panel, and with a hiss and a groan, the heavy doors slowly slid open. It was time for the final showdown. The room wasn't just full. It was packed to the gills with delegates, guards, and spectators, a powder keg just waiting for a spark. On a raised platform, surrounded by his personal imperial guards in their ceremonial armor, sat Emperor Thyron Velcaris. He looked ancient, his skin a deep, bruised purple, and his silver eyes were as cold as the empty space between stars. He had come straight from his private worship to see this for himself. At his right hand stood Lord Valerix, sleek, handsome, and cruel. His face was a perfect mask of fake concern, barely hiding the fury he felt at having his conspiracy exposed. On the other side stood Ambassador Thornwell and Director Gisham with the last remnants of the Terran delegation. Their faces were ghost white, watching their political careers vanish before their very eyes. And right in the middle of it all, like a dark, armored statue, stood the Quori ambassador. He had his arms crossed, radiating nothing but pure disgust for every single person in the room. In an instant, every eye snapped to the doorway. Across the galaxy, 100 chaotic camera feeds flickered, and everyone watching let out a single, collective gasp. The silence that fell over the room wasn't just quiet. It was a total vacuum. It was the sound of every single rule of Tyrian society, every diplomatic custom, every cultural norm, shattering into 1 billion tiny pieces that could never be put back together. Because there, standing in the doorway, was Kara. She hadn't bothered with a covering tunic. She hadn't hidden her wound. She was wearing the truth itself like a suit of armor. The glowing filaments. That's what they really were. The biotech cage she had spent her entire life hiding was now on full, defiant display. It was a complex, beautiful, and terrifying web of silver blue light that traced every line of her true, angular, alien body. This wasn't some projection or hologram. It was her actual framework, glowing with a soft, inner light. She had taken her deepest shame and turned it into her strongest armor. By her people's strictest laws, she was completely exposed. But for the very first time in her life, she was truly clothed in her own truth. Cross stood right beside her, his human hand held firmly and publicly in her blue one. He was her translator, her protector, and her partner. And his presence sent a message just as powerful as her exposed form. Lord Valerix was the first to find his voice, and it came out as a raw, primal roar of disgust. "Abomination!" he screamed, pointing a trembling hand at her. "How dare you? How dare you display such indecency before your emperor, before the entire galaxy? Guards, seize her now! She is defiled! Unclean!" A few of the Tyrian Imperial Guards flinched, their hands instinctively moving to their weapons. They were torn between obeying their emperor and the deep cultural horror of what they were seeing. Kara took a single, deliberate step into the room. Her voice wasn't the sweet musical tone of her diplomatic personality. It wasn't a whisper, it was the clear, cold ring of a judgment bell. "I am Kara of the First Blood," she announced. "And I am not defiled. I am revealed." She looked right past Valerix, past all the ambassadors and delegates, her silver eyes locking directly with the ancient, cold gaze of her father. "My Lord Valerix," she said, her voice echoing in the stunned hall. "You claim to own me. You claim this body," she said, gesturing to the glowing network on her skin. "You claim our betrothal contract, signed before I was even born, all to secure your own political power." "It is your sacred duty," Valerix snarled, desperation creeping into his voice. "My duty is to the truth," Kara stated with chilling finality. "And by the ancient right of a Sheol, the right of self-choosing, a law older than this empire, I hereby dissolve this betrothal. Permanently." Emperor Thyron's eyes shot open in genuine shock. The right of self-choosing hadn't been used in over 1,000 years. Most thought it was just a myth, a dead law. "The contract is broken," Kara declared. "I'm not for sale. Not to you. Not to anyone." The room exploded into absolute chaos. Tyrian nobles began shouting, calling her a heretic, a destroyer of their sacred traditions. Ambassador Thornwell, thinking he saw an opening, lunged forward. "This is insanity. She's clearly unstable. She's been brainwashed by the human," he yelled, pointing an accusatory finger at Cross, his face turning a blotchy purple. "She has been psychologically compromised." "This entire summit is now legally void. Terran security, arrest that man immediately. He is a traitor to his own species." A squad of Terran soldiers raised their rifles and began to advance on Cross with grim looks on their faces, but Cross didn't move an inch. He didn't even flinch. He just took a small step forward, positioning himself partly in front of Kara. He was bonded to her. He could feel her pain and exhaustion, but underneath it all was a core of steel strong enough to break planets, and it filled him with that same resolve. "Stand down," Cross said. His voice wasn't loud, but it sliced through the noise like a razor. "You have no authority here, translator!" Gisham shrieked. "He has my authority," Kara stated simply. Cross looked directly at Thornwell, then at Emperor Thyron, and finally at the holographic cameras broadcasting the whole scene to the stars. "My name is Theron Cross," he said, his voice ringing clear and true. "I am a citizen of Terra, and I am bound to her through the Ishtael. You call her unstable. You call her compromised. The truth is, you're just afraid because she is the only person in this entire room who isn't lying." He then stepped away from Kara's side, his hands open and empty, making himself a completely defenseless target. "You want my life? Take it," he offered plainly. "I give it here as a pledge, as my oath on the Ishtael. The truth bond, Every single word she is about to say is the absolute truth. My life is the guarantee." The Terran soldiers froze. They were human. They understood sacrifice. Even if they didn't get the whole telepathic bond thing, they understood a man willing to die for his beliefs. The Tyrians were even more stunned. To offer a life pledge on a truth bond was an ancient, spiritual act so profound that it silenced even the angriest nobles. Cross turned and gave Kara a slight nod. The floor was hers. Kara raised her hand. In it, she was holding the small data chip they had found in her suite. The proof of everything. "You have called me a liar," she said to the silent room. "You've called me a heretic. You've accused this man of manipulating me just to steal your mineral rights." She looked right at her father. "My emperor, you sent a warship to capture me and eliminate him. You, Lord Valerix, sent bounty hunters to murder me, and you, Ambassador Thornwell, sent a spy to make it all happen." "Lies!" Thornwell bellowed desperately. "Treasonous slander!" Valerix roared. "Then look," Kara said calmly. She threw the data chip across the room to a terrified technician sitting at the broadcast control booth. "Put it on the main display. All of it. Every file." The technician, caught between all the furious factions, decided to obey the most terrifying person in the room. With trembling hands, he slammed the chip into the console. The main holographic display flickered and then roared to life. The proof unraveled in stark, cold, undeniable code. Encrypted messages, financial records, audio logs, video clips. The entire galaxy watched as the whole conspiracy laid itself bare in agonizing detail. They saw the message from Valerix to Thornwell's chief of staff. "The Vaden minerals are yours. The price is the girl. She must be permanently removed." They saw the assassination orders sent to Quori mercenaries. They saw the payments made to Lissa, the embedded Terran spy. They saw the whole rotten, treasonous scheme from start to finish. Lord Valerix was selling out his own people and his own fiancée just to grab a throne. The Terran delegation was willing to ignite an interstellar war over mining rights. Cross watched Valerix's face. The handsome, cruel mask didn't just crack, it completely shattered. He glanced at Emperor Thyron, whose ancient face was now a mask of terrifying, cold, absolute rage. He looked at Thornwell, who had physically stumbled backward, his hand clamped over his mouth in sheer horror. "I invoke the ancient law!" Kara's voice rang out, pulling every eye back to her glowing form. "Treason of the blood! I demand the judgment of the first throne!" She pointed a single, glowing finger directly at Valerix. This was it, the breaking point. But the galaxy had one more surprise in store. The Quori ambassador, who had been watching the whole thing with a grim, clicking amusement, finally made his move. He had watched his supposed allies, Valerix and Thornwell, get utterly exposed and destroyed. His own plan was in shambles, but he was determined to salvage something from the wreckage. "This is pathetic," the Quori boomed, his voice like grinding continents. "Two entire species brought down by a single broken female and her pet human. Your alliance is dead. Your summit is a failure." He raised his armored gauntlet. "And this station," he declared, "is now Quori sovereign territory." A high-pitched signal screamed from his gauntlet, and all hell broke loose. Model. And just when you thought things couldn't get any worse for them, the whole station buckled. A massive blast ripped through the ship's hull, and the giant observation window, the one that was supposed to inspire peace, didn't just crack, it exploded inward. It was a complete nightmare. A tornado of metal and glass tore through the grand hall, while alarms blared and emergency blast doors slammed shut with enough force to crush steel. The whole scene was bathed in sickening red emergency lights. And then, a technician screamed the one word that changed everything. "Quori warships!" They weren't just firing on the station. They were firing on both fleets. It was a trap. It turned out the Quori were never just hired guns. They'd been playing the long game, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They let the humans and the Tyrians wear each other down, and now they were swooping in to pick up the pieces and take everything. Absolute chaos erupted. Dignitaries scrambled for the exits. Human soldiers and alien nobles, who were enemies just seconds before, were now shoving each other out of the way to escape. But Kiara and Cross didn't run. That special bond between them lit up, stronger than ever. It wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was a live, tactical link. He could feel her cold, analytical thoughts, and she could feel his gut instincts for strategy. They were thinking as a single mind. "They're aiming for the stabilization thrusters," Cross shouted over the chaos. "They're trying to send the whole station crashing down!" Kiara finished his thought, her voice echoing in his mind as he heard her speak. She looked at him, their eyes locking. The fleets are still focused on each other. They have no idea what's really happening. Cross's voice was filled with grim determination. "We have to stop them." Kiara immediately snatched a communicator from a guard who had fallen. At the same time, Cross took over the technician's broadcast console. In that instant, they stopped being a princess and a translator. They became a two-person command center. "Hexer, Talak, secure that bulkhead," Kiara ordered. Her guards, loyal to the very end, instantly moved to stop the panicked crowd from trampling the fallen. She switched to a top-priority military channel. "Tyrian Fleet Command, this is Princess Kiara. Cease fire with the Terran fleet immediately. All ships, target the Quarai vessels. I repeat, Lord Valor is a traitor. The Quarai are the real enemy. All forces, open fire on the Quarai." But the Tyrian commanders were frozen, confused. Their own emperor was right there in the room, stunned into silence. Cross saw the hesitation and knew what he had to do. He jumped onto the Terran military frequency. "Terran Fleet, this is Translator Cross of Leonidas Prime. Ambassador Thornwell has been compromised. This is not a Tyrian attack. We are all under attack by the Quarai. Check your scanners. They're firing on everyone. We need an emergency ceasefire now." The Quarai ambassador, watching his master plan crumble right before his eyes, made a desperate move. He grabbed a plasma rifle and aimed it straight at Kiara. Cross saw it happen, but was too far away to do anything. He screamed her name, but Kiara was already moving. She didn't try to fight the ambassador herself. She didn't have to. She looked straight at her father, Emperor Thyron, who was still frozen on his throne, watching his world fall apart. "Father!" she yelled, her voice hitting him both out loud and inside his mind, a command so powerful it couldn't be ignored. "Lead your people, or you will be forgotten." The old emperor's eyes snapped into focus, and he truly saw her for the first time, not as a political tool, not as a biotech freak, but as his daughter, his rightful heir, showing unbelievable courage. He raised his hand. He spoke a single word into his command link. "Engage." On the bridge of the flagship, the Tyrian fleet got the order. Instantly, they turned. They didn't fire on the humans. Instead, they unleashed a blinding storm of white-hot energy directly at the Quarai warships. The commander of the Leonidas Prime saw the Tyrians pivot, got Cross's data, and understood everything in a flash. The Terran fleet moved in perfect sync. Just moments ago, they were ready to destroy each other. Now, united by the two people they had both tried to ruin, the Terran and Tyrian fleets formed a perfect pincer, catching the Quarai in a brutal, inescapable crossfire. Back on the station, another explosion shook the hall. A huge support pillar came crashing down, trapping dozens of people, both human and Tyrian, under a pile of burning metal. The Quarai ambassador, his rifle blasted from his hands by one of Kiara's guards, was sealed off behind a slamming emergency door. Cross and Kiara rushed toward the trapped delegates. "I can't lift this!" Cross yelled, his hands burning on the red-hot metal. "You don't have to," Kiara said calmly. She knelt down, placed her blue hands on the wreckage, and pushed. Not with her muscles, but with her mind, with that forbidden power she had used to heal him. The massive steel beam groaned and began to lift. Cross saw a Tyrian noble, a man who had been calling for Kiara's death just minutes ago, staring at her with a look of pure shock and awe. Cross and Hexar started pulling people free, saving dozens of lives, Tyrians and Terrans, one after another, as the whole galaxy watched on flickering emergency broadcasts. The battle in space was over fast. The Quarai fleet, caught between two superior forces working together, was completely shattered. They broke and fled into deep space. A shaky truce was declared between the humans and the Tyrians. Finally, silence fell over the ruined hall. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burnt circuits. Survivors from both sides sat together in a state of shock, just staring into space. Kiara and Cross stood in the middle of it all, covered in dust and grime. The glowing lines in her skin were dim now, her energy totally spent. He was breathing hard, the ribs she had healed aching with the effort. They had done it. They had actually won. Every camera, every feed, every single person in that room and across billions of screens was looking right at them. Cross looked at Kiara, his heart so full of emotion that, for the first time in his life, the man who lived by words had none. He was speechless. Kiara turned to him. She saw his face, streaked with dirt, and his eyes, filled with a loyalty and love she never knew could exist. She was exhausted and in pain, but for the first time, she was truly free. Her slender blue hand trembled as she reached up and gently touched his cheek. She smiled, a real smile, full of pure feeling. Then right there in front of her father, her court, and the entire galaxy, she leaned in and softly kissed his forehead. It was a Talora, a Tyrian soul blessing, the greatest honor you could give someone. With her hand still on his cheek, she looked at the nearest camera. Her voice was just a whisper, but it traveled across the stars. "He was honest about my body," she said, her silver eyes shining as she looked at Cross. "But the truth is, he saw my heart. He saw my soul. And that changed everything." The silence held for a single, perfect moment. Then the emotion broke through like a flood. In the hall, the young diplomat who had helped them burst into tears of joy. The Tyrian noble Kiara had saved, struggled to his feet, and gave her a deep, ancient bow of total loyalty. The human soldiers didn't cheer. They lowered their weapons and started to clap, a slow, steady, powerful sound of profound respect. And all across the galaxy, the reaction was the same: tears, cheers, and a deep, hopeful silence. The scandal was over. A legend had been born. But this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The old way of doing things, built on lies and secrets, was gone for good. Lord Valor was immediately arrested by the Emperor's personal guard, his face a twisted mask of fury. Ambassador Thornwell was called back home in total disgrace, his career in ruins. Kiara didn't take the throne right away. Instead, she created something new, a diplomatic order based not on secrets, but on the Ishtel principle, the truth bond. It was a policy of radical honesty, and Cross was right there by her side through it all. He wasn't her husband or her employee or even her translator anymore. Their bond was now deeper than words. He was her equal partner. He was the human who understood the alien heart, and she was the alien who understood the human soul. Together, they became the bridge that both their worlds so desperately needed. Their love story wasn't just a romance. It became the bedrock of a new law. It was the foundation for the first true, lasting peace the galaxy had ever known. Nexus Aegis Station was rebuilt from the ground up. Gone was the fragile optimism of glass and chrome. In its place stood something stronger, more honest in its design and its purpose. And right in the middle of the new Grand Concourse, a memorial statue was placed. It wasn't Kiara in her flawless diplomatic poise, nor was it her blazing with defiant biotech filaments. It was a simple, humble statue, cast in plain, dark bronze. It showed a woman, unmistakably Tyrian in her true, angular form, standing strong beside a man who was clearly human, solid and steady. They weren't gazing into each other's eyes. They were standing shoulder to shoulder, as equals. Their hands joined, looking out together through the viewport and into the future they had fought so hard to build.